The Yorkshire moors were a desolate expanse, a wasteland of gnarled heather and jagged stone, where the wind howled like a chorus of the damned. A storm had descended, its fury tearing at the earth, lightning slashing the sky with blades of white fire. Through the mud and rain staggered a young woman, a white dress clinging to her shivering frame, stained with blood that bloomed like roses against the fabric. Her name was unknown, her past a mystery, but her terror was a living thing, pulsing in her wide, frantic eyes. She clutched a rosary, its beads slipping through her trembling fingers, the cross glinting in the storm's fleeting light. Each step was a battle, her bare feet sinking into the mire, her breath a ragged prayer. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Behind her, the shadows writhed, unnatural and swift. A figure pursued her, cloaked in a nun's habit, but the veil was tattered, flapping like the wings of a carrion bird. Beneath it, glimpses of something grotesque flickered, a face too pale, eyes like burning coals, a mouth stretched into a silent, ravenous scream. The woman stumbled, her foot catching on a twisted root, and she fell, the rosary tumbling into the mud. She crawled, her nails clawing at the earth, toward the iron gates of St. Agnes Convent, a Gothic monolith looming against the storm. Its towers pierced the sky, their spires like the fingers of a judgmental god, and the gate stood unyielding, cold as a tombstone. "It's here," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper, drowned by the thunder's roll. Her hands scrabbled at the bars, leaving smears of blood that mingled with the rain. The veiled figure drew closer, its movements jerky, as if pulled by invisible strings. Its skeletal hand reached out, and the woman screamed, a sound that tore through the night. "Please, God, no," she cried, but the figure paused, its head tilting unnaturally, as if savoring her despair. Lightning struck, and in its glare, the figure vanished, leaving only the echo of her scream. The woman collapsed, her body slumping against the gate, her eyes fluttering shut. Her final breath was a prayer, unanswered, and the rosary lay abandoned, its cross scorched black, as if kissed by hellfire. 3 years later, the moors were silent, but St. Agnes Convent bore the weight of that night like a scar. Sister Clara Voss knelt in the chapel, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened, her dark hair tucked beneath a wimple that felt like a cage. At 25, she was a vision of beauty that seemed at odds with her vows, green eyes that held secrets, a face that drew glances despite the convent's austerity. The stained glass windows cast crimson and gold across her, painting her in the colors of martyrdom, but her prayers were mechanical, drowned by a whisper only she could hear. It was not the voice of God, but something older, colder, slithering through her mind like a serpent. "Sister Clara," Mother Agnes snapped from the altar, her voice sharp as a blade. "Your mind strays again." Clara bowed her head, her lips forming an apology, but the whisper grew louder, a hiss of words she couldn't grasp, "You cannot hide." She rose, her movements stiff, and slipped from the chapel, the other nuns' murmurs trailing her like ghosts. The convent's halls were a labyrinth of stone, their walls damp with the breath of centuries, their shadows thick with secrets. Clara's cell was a sparse refuge, a narrow bed, a wooden cross, a single candle. She lit it, the flame trembling as if afraid, and knelt again, her rosary cold in her hands. She prayed for peace, for forgiveness, but the whisper returned, sharper now, and when she looked down, a faint burn mark marked the rosary's beads, fresh and raw. Her breath caught, and the candle flickered, casting a shadow that moved when it shouldn't, a silhouette of a veiled figure, gone when she blinked. Clara clutched the rosary tighter, her heart pounding, and whispered a prayer not for salvation, but for courage to face the darkness she knew was coming. The morning was grey, the moor shrouded in mist that clung to the earth like a funeral veil. A horse-drawn carriage rattled up the muddy path to St. Agnes Convent, its wheels groaning under the weight of the damp air. Detective Elias Kane stepped out, his boots sinking into the mire, his grey coat patched and worn but his posture unyielding. At 32, he carried the scars of a soldier, both on his body and in his sharp, untrusting eyes. His hat was tilted against the wind, and he carried a leather case stamped with the Metropolitan Police insignia, a reminder of his mission. 3 nuns dead in a year, their suicides too convenient, their wounds too strange. Elias was no stranger to death, but the whispers of murder in the village of Thornwick had drawn him here, to this forsaken place where faith and fear seemed to coexist. The convent's gates creaked open, revealing Sister Isolde, her sharp features framed by a wimple, her eyes narrowing at the sight of a man. "State your business," she said, her voice laced with defiance, as if the convent were a fortress and she its sentinel. Elias smirked, unfazed. "Detective Elias Kane, London Police. I'm here about the deaths." Isolde's lips tightened, but she gestured for him to follow, leading him through a courtyard where ivy strangled crumbling stone statues. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive, as if the convent itself were watching, judging. Elias's gaze swept the towers, the arched windows, the faint stains on the walls that might have been water or blood. In Mother Agnes's office, a stark room of dark wood and flickering candles, Elias faced the formidable nun. Her black habit seemed to absorb the light, her face a mask of piety, but her eyes were hard, unyielding. "The sisters lost their faith," she said, dismissing the deaths with a wave of her hand. "Their suicides were tragedies, not crimes." Elias leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "Tragedies don't leave ligature marks that don't match a noose, Mother Superior. Nor do they burn rosaries into flesh." A soft gasp came from the corner, Sister Clara, assigned to assist him, standing with her hands folded but her eyes wide. Her beauty was a distraction, a quiet rebellion against the convent's severity, and Elias felt a pull, a spark that he pushed aside. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the air charged with something unspoken. Agnes noticed, her lips thinning. "Sister Clara will guide you, detective, but tread carefully. This is sacred ground." Elias nodded, his smile faint but defiant. "Sacred or not, I'll find the truth." Clara led him to the guest quarters, her steps silent but her presence loud in his mind. "You don't believe in God," she said, her voice soft, not accusing but curious. Elias shrugged, setting down his case. "I believe in what I can see, sister. And this place is hiding something." Clara's fingers brushed her rosary, and she seemed about to speak, but a shadow crossed her face, and she turned away. Elias watched her go, the whisper she hadn't mentioned echoing in his own mind now, a faint, mocking hiss that he dismissed as the wind. But as he unpacked his notes, a single page slipped free, its edge scorched, though he hadn't touched a flame. Night fell over St. Agnes Convent, a cloak of darkness that pressed against the stone walls, seeping through cracks and pooling in corners. Clara knelt in her cell, the candle's flame a frail shield against the void. The rosary lay on her bedside, its beads glinting in the flickering light, the burn mark from last night joined by another, fresher, as if branded by an unseen hand. She prayed, her lips moving over familiar words, but they felt hollow, like shouting into a storm. The whisper was back, no longer a murmur but a voice, low and deliberate, weaving through her thoughts, "You cannot escape." Her heart raced, her fingers tightening around the rosary until they ached. But the beads grew warm, almost alive, and she dropped them, gasping. The convent was silent, but the silence was a predator, watching, waiting. Clara stood, her bare feet cold on the stone floor, and moved to the window. The moors stretched beyond, a sea of shadows under a moonless sky, their vastness both a comfort and a threat. In her dreams, the veiled figure waited there, its hands dripping with blood, its eyes boring into her soul. Tonight, those dreams felt closer, as if the walls of St. Agnes were thinning, letting the nightmare seep through. A creak echoed down the hall, soft but deliberate, and Clara froze. The convent was a maze of secrets, locked doors, hidden staircases, whispers of a catacomb sealed long ago, spoken of only in hushed tones by the older nuns. She slipped into the corridor, drawn by the sound, her candle casting trembling shadows. The air grew colder as she descended a narrow stair, one she'd never noticed before, its steps worn smooth by forgotten feet. The whisper followed, a chorus now, urging her forward. At the bottom was a door, its iron rusted, its lock heavy with age. The whisper surged, forming words, "Open it." Her hand trembled, hovering over the handle, but a voice cut through the dark. "Clara." Sister Isolde stood at the top of the stairs, her face pale, her candle flickering. "What are you doing?" Clara's breath caught, relief mingling with suspicion. "I heard something," she said, but Isolde's eyes were sharp, searching. "Go back to bed," Isolde said, her voice tight, but as she turned away, Clara saw something in her hand, a small key, glinting in the candlelight. Back in her cell, Clara couldn't shake the image of the door, the key, the whisper. She lit another candle, its flame weak against the darkness, and knelt again, her prayers desperate now. The rosary lay where she'd dropped it, and as she reached for it, the whisper roared, a single word, "Sinner." The candle flared, then died, plunging her into blackness. In the silence, a shadow moved at the foot of her bed, a veiled figure, its head tilted, its hands reaching. Clara screamed, scrambling back, but when she lit the candle again, the room was empty. The rosary was on the floor, its beads scattered, each one marked with a fresh burn, and Clara knew the truth. Whatever haunted St. Agnes was not just a dream, but a curse, and it had chosen her. The archived room of St. Agnes Convent was a tomb of forgotten knowledge, its air thick with the musty scent of decaying parchment and a faint tang of mildew. Shelves loomed like sentinels, sagging under the weight of leather-bound tomes and scrolls, their titles faded into illegibility. A single window, high and narrow, allowed a sliver of grey light to pierce the gloom, illuminating motes of dust that danced like restless spirits. Detective Elias Kane sat at a scarred oak table, his leather case open beside him, papers and notes scattered in a chaotic mosaic. At the center was a journal, its cover cracked, its pages yellowed, belonging to Sister Margaret, one of the 3 nuns whose deaths had drawn him to this forsaken place. The final entry was a frantic scrawl, written in a trembling hand, "The nun's prayer calls it. I saw her in the mirror, her eyes burned through me. God forgive me." Elias's brow furrowed, his fingers tracing the words as if they might yield their meaning through touch alone. A prayer that summoned something? He'd seen enough of London's underbelly to dismiss superstition, but the coroner's report, burn marks on Margaret's wrists inconsistent with any natural cause, gnawed at his logic. Sister Clara Voss entered, her footsteps soft but deliberate, carrying a tray of tea as an excuse to join him. Her presence was a quiet disruption, her beauty a stark contrast to the convent's austerity. Her dark hair was tucked beneath her wimple, but a stray lock curled against her cheek, and her green eyes held a storm of secrets. She set the tray down, her hands trembling slightly, the memory of the locked door and Isolde's key still vivid. "Any progress, detective?" she asked, her voice low, as if afraid to disturb the room's silence. Elias glanced up, caught by the way the dim light softened her features. "This journal's a riddle," he said, sliding it toward her. Margaret was terrified of something she called her. "Any ideas?" Clara's breath hitched as she read the entry, her fingers brushing the page. The whisper she'd heard last night stirred in her mind, a cold hiss, "You are mine." She pushed it down, focusing on the words. "It's not a prayer we use," she said, but her voice wavered, betraying her doubt. Elias leaned back, studying her. "You're holding something back, sister." "I'm good at spotting it." Clara's cheeks flushed, and she looked away, her fingers tightening around her rosary. The beads were warm, unnaturally so, and a faint burn mark marred the cross, fresh since last night. She didn't answer, and the silence stretched, charged with unspoken questions. Footsteps broke the tension. Father Benedict, the convent's priest, entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. His silver hair gleamed in the half-light, his blue eyes sharp and assessing, though his smile was warm, almost too perfect. "Detective Kane, you delve into matters best left alone," he said, his voice smooth but edged with warning. "These journals are sacred." Elias met his gaze, unyielding. "So are lives, Father. I'm here to save them." Benedict's smile tightened, and Clara sensed a shadow pass between them, a silent clash of wills. As Benedict left, Elias slipped a folded page from the journal into his coat, a sketch of a veiled figure, its hands dripping ink that looked too much like blood. Clara saw it and froze, her heart pounding. The figure was the same as in her dreams, the same as the shadow in her cell. "Where did you find that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elias raised an eyebrow, sensing her fear. "Margaret drew it. You know her, don't you?" Clara nodded, her throat tight. "She was kind. She died alone." The whisper surged, louder now, and Clara clutched her rosary, wincing as it burned her palm. Elias noticed, his eyes narrowing, but before he could press her, a creak echoed from the shelves, and a book fell, its pages fluttering open to a blank sheet, blank except for a single burn mark, curling like a claw. Clara gasped, and Elias stood, his hand on his knife, but the room was empty. The whisper laughed, a sound only Clara heard, and she knew the truth. St. Agnes was not just haunted, it was alive. The convent's garden was a wild, untamed place, a tangle of roses and thorns that seemed to thrive on neglect. At dusk, the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and fading blooms, the sky bruised with shades of violet and grey. Clara walked the winding paths, her habit brushing against the overgrown foliage, seeking solace from the chaos of her thoughts. The journal, the sketch, the burned rosary, they pressed against her like a weight, threatening to crush her fragile resolve. She paused by a stone fountain, its basin filled with dark water that reflected the dying light. The carved angel above it was weathered, its face half erased, but its eyes seemed to follow her, judgmental and cold. Clara traced its wings, her fingers trembling, and whispered a prayer. but the words felt empty, drowned by the whisper that haunted her, "Sinner." A rustle broke her reverie, and she turned to find Elias approaching, his coat dusted with ash from the archive's fireplace. His presence was a jolt, both comforting and dangerous, his rugged features softened by the twilight but his eyes sharp, always searching. "You shouldn't be here," Clara said, her voice lacking conviction, her heart betraying her with a quickened beat. Elias stopped close, too close, the space between them charged with a forbidden energy. "Neither should you," he replied, his tone teasing but his gaze serious. "You're running from something, sister. I can see it." Clara's breath caught, torn between fear and a pull toward him that felt like falling. She stepped back, her fingers brushing the fountain's edge, the cold stone grounding her. "I'm just a nun," she said, but the words rang hollow, a lie she couldn't sustain. Elias tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Just a nun doesn't flinch at a drawing like it's her own death warrant." He pulled the sketch from his coat, the veiled figure stark against the crumpled paper. Clara's stomach twisted, the image a mirror to her nightmares. For a heartbeat, she saw not Elias but the Wraith, its burning eyes boring into her soul. She stumbled, and Elias caught her arm, his touch steadying but igniting something deeper, a spark she couldn't name. "Tell me what you see," he urged, his voice low, almost a plea. Clara pulled away, her cheeks flushed, her vows a fragile barrier against the tide of her feelings. "Nothing," she whispered, but her eyes betrayed her, wide with fear and something else, longing. As she turned to flee, a shadow moved at the garden's edge. Sister Isolde stood there, her face a mask of hurt and anger, her sharp features illuminated by the last light of day. She'd seen the moment, the way Clara's gaze softened for Elias, the way his hand lingered on her arm. Isolde's hand tightened around her rosary, its beads biting into her palm, and her eyes gleamed with unshed tears. Clara's heart sank, but Isolde turned away, her footsteps fading into the dusk. The whisper rode the wind, a mocking laugh, and Clara looked down at her rosary, its cross now marked by a new burn mark, as if the garden itself had judged her. Above, the sky darkened, and a raven cawed, its cry a warning of the storm to come, not just in the heavens, but within the walls of St. Agnes. Father Benedict's study was a sanctuary of secrets, its walls lined with books that seemed to whisper in languages long forgotten. The room was dim, lit only by a single candelabrum, its flames casting shadows that danced like specters across the oak panels. Clara stood before his desk, summoned after the garden encounter, her nerves frayed like the edges of her habit. Benedict sat opposite, his tall frame commanding, his silver hair gleaming in the candlelight. His blue eyes were piercing, his smile warm but calculated, a mask that hid something sharper, hungrier. A crucifix hung at his chest, but it seemed less a symbol of faith than a weapon, glinting with an edge of menace. "You've been distracted, Sister Clara," he said, his voice smooth as velvet but laced with an undercurrent of reproach. "Is it the detective's influence, or something deeper?" Clara's mouth went dry, her hands clasped tightly to hide their trembling. The whisper had followed her here, a low hum that pulsed in her ears, "He sees you." "I'm only helping him, Father," she said, but the words felt like a confession, her guilt laid bare under Benedict's gaze. He leaned forward, his fingers steepled, and gestured to a book on his desk, an ancient tome, its leather cover etched with a cross entwined with a serpent, the same symbol from Margaret's journal. "The Nun's Prayer," he said, his voice almost reverent, as if speaking of a lover. "A ritual of protection, or so the old tales claim. But faith is a dangerous thing, Clara. It can summon light, or shadow. His words hung heavy, a warning wrapped in silk, and Clara's heart raced, sensing a truth he wasn't fully revealing. She shifted, her eyes drawn to the book, its pages worn but pulsing with a strange energy. "What does it protect us from?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Benedict's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "From ourselves, perhaps," he said, his tone cryptic. "Or from those who would exploit our weaknesses." He stood, moving closer, and Clara felt trapped, the air between them thick with unspoken threats. "Be careful, sister," he continued, his hand brushing the crucifix. "The detective seeks truth, but truth can destroy as easily as it saves." The whisper surged, clear now, "He knows." Clara's breath caught, and she stepped back, her rosary burning in her pocket, its heat a warning she couldn't ignore. As she left the study, the convent's halls seemed darker, the shadows longer, stretching like fingers to pull her back. She passed a mirror in the corridor, and for a heartbeat, the Wraith stared back, its veiled face inches from her own, its eyes like twin flames. She gasped, stumbling, but the mirror was empty when she looked again. Her rosary fell to the floor, its chain tangled, and as she knelt to retrieve it, she saw Benedict watching from the study's doorway, his smile gone, his eyes cold. That night, Elias lay awake in his guest quarters, the journal and sketch before him, when a knock came. Clara, her face pale, her voice urgent. "It's not just a prayer," she said, her words trembling. "It's a summoning." Before he could respond, a bell tolled, low and mournful, and the whisper echoed through the convent, a promise of horrors yet to come. The library of St. Agnes Convent was a cavern of shadows, its high ceilings lost in darkness, its shelves groaning under centuries of accumulated knowledge. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax, and a single candelabrum cast a feeble glow across a long table where Detective Elias Kane sat, surrounded by a fortress of papers. His leather case lay open, revealing notes, sketches, and the journal of Sister Margaret, but his focus was on a single sheet, a letter tucked inside the journal, its text a labyrinth of coded symbols and looping script. The cipher defied his usual methods, each character a taunt, as if daring him to unravel its secrets. Elias's fingers traced the page, his rugged face etched with frustration. 3 nuns dead, their bodies marked by burns, their deaths too precise to be suicides. St. Agnes was no place of peace, but a chessboard where an unseen player moved with lethal intent. Sister Clara Voss entered, her presence a quiet disturbance in the library's stillness. She carried a worn volume, an excuse to join him, though her green eyes betrayed a deeper purpose. The encounter with Father Benedict had left her shaken, his words about the nun's prayer echoing like a warning. She set the book down, her hands unsteady, the rosary in her pocket a constant reminder of the burns that appeared without cause. "Have you found anything?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent, as if afraid the walls might listen. Elias glanced up, caught by the way the candlelight caught the curve of her cheek, a beauty that seemed to defy the convent's austerity. "This letter's a lock," he said, sliding it toward her. "Margaret wrote it, but it's in code. I need a key." Clara leaned closer, her breath catching as their hands brushed, the touch a spark in the dim room. Her eyes scanned the cipher, pausing on a symbol, a cross entwined with a serpent, the same as on Benedict's book. "I've seen this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "In the chapel, carved beneath the altar." Elias's gaze sharpened, sensing a thread to pull. "The altar," he repeated, his mind racing. "What else have you seen, Clara?" She hesitated, the whisper stirring in her ears, a cold hiss, "He sees you." The rosary burned in her pocket, and she winced, pulling her hand away. Elias noticed, his eyes narrowing, but before he could press her, a shadow moved at the library's edge. Sister Isolde stepped into the light, her sharp features tight with anger, her eyes flicking between Clara and Elias. "Mother Agnes needs you, Clara," she said, her voice clipped, her gaze lingering on Elias with suspicion. Clara nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of Isolde's disapproval, and left, the rosary's heat a warning she couldn't ignore. Alone, Elias studied the cipher again, his fingers tracing the serpent cross. The whisper Clara had described seemed to echo now, a faint hum that he dismissed as fatigue. But as he turned the page, a new burn mark appeared, curling the paper's edge like a claw, its edges still warm. He froze, his hand reaching for his knife, but the library was empty, save for the whisper, now a low laugh, curling through the shadows. Elias stood, his heart pounding, and slipped the letter into his coat, determined to find the altar and its secrets before the convent claimed another life. The cloister of St. Agnes was a skeletal frame of stone arches, its pillars draped in ivy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Clara hurried through its shadowed paths, the night air cold and sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. Isolde's summons had been abrupt, pulling her from the library's tension, but it wasn't Mother Agnes waiting, it was Isolde, standing by a cracked statue of the Virgin Mary, her hands clenched, her face a storm of hurt and anger. The moors beyond the convent walls whispered with unseen eyes, their vastness a reminder of the isolation that bound them all. Clara slowed, her heart sinking as she saw the pain in Isolde's eyes, a pain she knew she'd caused. "What's wrong?" Clara asked, her voice gentle but wary, her habit brushing the stone as she approached. Isolde turned, her sharp features softened by a vulnerability Clara rarely saw. "You're changing, Clara," she said, stepping closer, her voice low but fierce. "Since he came." "The detective." The words were a blade, cutting through the fragile bond they built in the convent's darkness. Isolde had been Clara's confidant, her laughter a beacon in the endless grey of their vows, but now that light was dimmed by jealousy. "He's here to help," Clara said, but the defense felt weak, tainted by the memory of Elias's touch in the library, the way her heart had quickened under his gaze. "Help?" Isolde scoffed, her voice rising, echoing off the stone. "He's a man, Clara, and men bring chaos. I see how you look at him, how he looks at you." Clara flinched, the truth a weight she couldn't shed. She wanted to deny it, to cling to her vows, but the pull toward Elias was a tide, relentless and forbidden. "You're wrong," she lied, but Isolde's eyes gleamed with tears, her hands trembling as she stepped closer. "Am I?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I've stood by you, Clara, through every doubt, every fear. And now you choose him." Clara's throat tightened, guilt and sorrow warring within her. She reached for Isolde, but her friend recoiled, the rosary in her hand glinting in the moonlight, its beads biting into her palm. Isolde turned away, her footsteps fading into the cloister's shadows, but not before Clara saw the hurt in her eyes, a wound deeper than words. Clara stood alone, the Virgin's gaze heavy on her, the statue's cracked face seeming to weep. The whisper returned, sharper now, weaving through the wind, "Sinner." She clutched her rosary, but it burned her hand, and when she opened her palm, a fresh scorch mark scarred the beads, its edges raw and red. Above, a raven cawed, its cry a warning, and Clara felt the convent's walls closing in, a prison not just of stone but of secrets. She sank to her knees, her prayers desperate, but the whisper laughed, and the statue's shadow seemed to shift, a veiled figure watching from the darkness. The chapel of St. Agnes was a cathedral of silence, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows, its stained glass windows dim under the weight of night. Candles flickered along the walls, their flames trembling as if afraid, casting warped shadows across the stone floor. Clara stood before the altar, summoned by a note slipped under her cell door, its script sharp and urgent, "Come alone. The truth waits." She'd expected Elias, perhaps, or even Isolde, seeking reconciliation, but the chapel was empty, save for the crucifix above the altar, its Christ figure gazing down with eyes of sorrow. The whisper was here, too, a low chant that pulsed in her ears, forming words she couldn't grasp. "Find it." Her rosary burned in her pocket, its heat a constant reminder of the curse that clung to her. She approached the altar, its stone worn smooth by centuries of prayers, and knelt, her fingers searching the base as she told Elias. The serpent cross symbol was there, etched deep, its lines cold and unyielding. She pressed it, her heart pounding, and a low grinding echoed through the chapel. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow stair descending into darkness. The whisper surged, urging her forward, but fear rooted her in place. She lit a candle from the altar, its flame weak against the void, and took a step, then another, the stair spiraling into a damp, airless passage. The walls were carved with symbols, crosses and serpents entwined, their edges glowing faintly, as if alive. Clara's breath caught as she reached a mural at the passage's end, a nun, her hands raised, a veiled figure bound in chains before her, its eyes burning with malice. "The nun's prayer," Clara murmured, her voice echoing in the stillness. The mural seemed to pulse, the chains rattling faintly, and she stepped back, her candle flickering. Footsteps sounded above, sharp and deliberate, and Clara froze, the whisper hissing, "She comes." A figure appeared at the stair's mouth, Sister Isolde, her face pale, a candle in one hand, a small book in the other, its cover marked with the serpent cross. "Clara," Isolde said, her voice trembling, "you shouldn't be here." Clara's heart sank, the memory of their argument fresh, but Isolde's eyes were wide with fear, not anger. "What's that book?" Clara asked, her voice steady despite the dread coiling within her. Isolde clutched the book, her knuckles white. "Father Benedict gave it to me," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "He said it would protect us." Clara's stomach twisted, Benedict's influence, Isolde's betrayal, the Wraith's growing power. The whisper roared, and the mural's chain seemed to snap, a low groan echoing in the passage. Isolde gasped, dropping the book, and Clara lunged for it, but a shadow moved behind them, the Wraith, its veiled form filling the passage's end, its eyes like twin flames. Clara screamed, the candle falling, and the passage plunged into darkness as the whisper chanted, "All will fall." The chapel of St. Agnes Convent stood like a hollowed-out relic, its stone walls soaked in centuries of prayers and pain. The air was thick with the scent of melted wax and incense, but beneath it lingered something fouler, a faint whiff of decay, as if the very stones wept blood. Clara and Sister Isolde had barely escaped the hidden passage, the Wraith's chilling presence still clinging to them like damp fog. Clara's heart pounded, her rosary burning in her pocket, its scorched beads a constant reminder of the curse that stalked her. Isolde clutched the book she'd dropped, her face pale, her eyes darting as if expecting the veiled figure to emerge from the shadows. They stumbled into the chapel, seeking sanctuary, but the silence was shattered by a scream, a raw, guttural cry that tore through the night, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Clara froze, her breath catching, as Detective Elias Kane burst through the chapel doors, his knife glinting in the candlelight, his leather case slung over his shoulder. His eyes met Clara's, a flicker of relief passing between them, but it was fleeting. "Where did it come from?" he demanded, his voice sharp, his soldier's instincts kicking in. Clara pointed toward the altar where the scream had originated, her hand trembling. They moved as one, Elias leading, Clara and Isolde close behind, their footsteps muffled by the stone floor. The candles flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe, and the crucifix above the altar tilted, its shadow twisting into a mockery of salvation. At the altar's base lay Sister Ruth, a young nun barely 20, her body crumpled like a discarded doll. Her habit was torn, her face frozen in a mask of terror, her eyes wide and unseeing. A rosary was fused to her palm, its beads blackened, the skin around it blistered and raw, as if branded by an unseen flame. Elias knelt beside her, his fingers searching for a pulse, but his jaw tightened, his expression grim. "She's gone," he said, his voice low, laced with anger. Clara's stomach churned, and she crossed herself, her lips moving in a silent prayer, but the whisper surged, clear and malevolent, "Her soul is mine." She staggered, clutching the altar for support, and Elias caught her arm, his touch grounding her, though it sparked a forbidden warmth she couldn't ignore. Isolde hovered behind, her breath ragged, the book still clutched to her chest. "This is your fault," she whispered, her voice breaking, her eyes on Elias. "You brought this upon us." Elias stood, his gaze hard. "This was here long before me, sister. And someone knows why." Clara's eyes darted to the choir loft, where a flicker of movement caught her attention, a shadow, veiled and swift, gliding along the railing. "Elias," she gasped, her voice barely audible. He followed her gaze, but the wraith was gone, leaving only a chill that sank into their bones. The whisper laughed, a sound that curled through the chapel, and Clara's rosary burned hotter, its heat searing through her habit. Elias pulled her closer, his voice urgent. "We need to find that passage again. It's the key." But as they turned to leave, Mother Agnes stormed in, her black habit sweeping the floor, her face a storm of fury. "What have you done?" she hissed, her eyes blazing. Clara's heart sank, she knew the truth was closer, but so was the danger. Dawn crept over the Yorkshire moors, a grey veil that did little to lift the oppressive weight of St. Agnes Convent. The chapel's horror lingered, Sister Ruth's death a fresh wound that sharpened Clara and Elias's resolve. They met in the archive, a cramped room of dust and secrets, where the coded letter, Margaret's journal, and Benedict's book lay spread across a table, their symbols a taunting puzzle. Elias's fingers traced the serpent cross, his mind piecing together fragments, his rugged face set with determination. Clara stood beside him, her habit damp from the morning's mist, her green eyes haunted by the wraith's image in the choir loft. The rosary in her pocket was a constant burn, its scorched beads a reminder of the curse that bound her to this place. "We need to go back," Elias said, his voice steady but his eyes wary. "The altar, the stair, it's where this started." Clara nodded, her throat tight. Ruth's face, frozen in terror, flashed in her mind, and the whisper echoed, a low chant, "Find it." She led him to the chapel, now empty save for the ghosts of last night's chaos. The altar loomed, its stone cold and unyielding, the serpent cross symbol etched at its base. Clara knelt, her fingers trembling as she pressed the symbol, and the familiar grinding echoed. The hidden panel slid open, revealing the narrow stair that had nearly claimed them. Elias lit a lantern, its light swallowed by the darkness below, and glanced at Clara. "You don't have to come," he said, but she shook her head, her resolve firm. "I do," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling within her. They descended, the stair spiraling into a passage that reeked of damp stone and decay. The walls were carved with symbols, crosses, serpents, and stranger shapes that seemed to pulse in the lantern's glow. Clara's breath caught as they reached the mural again, a nun, her hands raised, a veiled figure bound in chains, its eyes burning with malice. "The nun's prayer," Clara whispered, her voice echoing. Elias touched the mural, his fingers coming away dusted with ash, as if the paint was still wet. "This isn't protection," he said, his voice low. "It's a prison." The whisper surged, a chorus now, and Clara clutched her rosary, wincing as it burned her hand. Footsteps sounded above, sharp and deliberate, and Elias doused the lantern, plunging them into darkness. "Someone's coming," he whispered, his hand finding hers, a silent vow of protection. The footsteps grew closer, and Clara's heart pounded, the whisper hissing, "She betrays." A figure appeared at the stair's mouth, Isolde, her candle casting trembling shadows, her face pale but her eyes sharp with something Clara couldn't name, fear or guilt. "Clara, you can't be here," Isolde said, her voice tight, the book still clutched in her hand. Clara's grip on Elias tightened, torn between trust and doubt, but the whisper laughed, and the mural's chain seemed to rattle, a low groan echoing in the passage. Elias's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "What's in that book, sister?" Isolde hesitated, her defiance crumbling, and Clara knew the truth was close, but so was the Wraith, watching from the shadows. The hidden passage beneath the chapel was a tomb, its air thick with the weight of ancient sins. Clara and Elias stood frozen, their hands still clasped in the darkness, the lantern extinguished as Isolde's candle cast flickering shadows across the carved walls. The mural loomed behind them, its chained figure seeming to strain against its bonds, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Isolde's presence was a jolt, her sharp features softened by fear but hardened by something else, guilt, perhaps, or defiance. The book in her hand, marked with the serpent cross, was a damning clue, its leather cover worn but pulsing with an unnatural energy. Clara's heart sank, the memory of Isolde's anger in the cloister fresh, her words about Elias a wound that hadn't healed. The whisper was relentless, a chant that wove through her thoughts, "She betrays you." "What are you doing here?" Clara asked, her voice steady but laced with pain, her rosary burning in her pocket, its heat a warning she couldn't ignore. Isolde stepped closer, her candle trembling, her eyes flicking between Clara and Elias. "I could ask you the same," she said, her voice sharp, but it cracked, revealing the fear beneath. "You're digging into things you don't understand, Clara." "With him?" The accusation hung heavy, and Clara felt the weight of her divided loyalties, her vows, her friendship, her forbidden pull toward Elias. Elias released her hand, stepping forward, his gaze fixed on the book. "That's from Benedict," he said, his tone low, dangerous. "What does it say?" Isolde clutched the book tighter, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with panic. "It's for protection," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He said it would keep us safe." Clara's stomach twisted, Benedict's cryptic words in his study echoing in her mind, "Faith can summon shadow." Safe from what? She pressed, stepping closer, her voice trembling with anger and fear. Isolde hesitated, her gaze dropping to the book, and for a moment, Clara saw the Isolde she'd known, fierce, loyal, her laughter alight in the convent's darkness. But that Isolde was gone, replaced by this stranger, torn by secrets. "From it," Isolde said, her voice breaking. "The thing in the walls." The whisper roared, and the mural's chains rattled, a low groan shaking the passage. Clara gasped, and Isolde dropped the book, its pages fluttering open to reveal a single phrase in crimson ink, "The nun's prayer binds the flame." Elias lunged for the book, but a shadow moved at the passage's end, the Wraith, its veiled form filling the space, its eyes like twin embers. Clara screamed, a candle falling, and the passage plunged into chaos as the Wraith glided forward, its skeletal hand reaching for Isolde. Elias pulled Clara back, his knife flashing, but the Wraith's laughter echoed, a sound that clawed at their souls. Isolde stumbled, clutching her arm where the Wraith's touch had burned, and Clara grabbed her, dragging her toward the stair. The whisper chanted, "Relentless, all will fall." As they fled, the book lay abandoned, its pages curling as if kissed by an unseen flame, and Clara knew the truth: Isolde's betrayal was only the beginning, and the Wraith was far from done. The hidden passage beneath St. Agnes Convent was a suffocating labyrinth, its stone walls slick with damp and etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the flickering candlelight. Clara, Elias, and Isolde scrambled up the narrow stair, their breaths ragged, the Wraith's chilling laughter echoing behind them like a predator's taunt. The veiled figure had surged forward in the passage, its skeletal hand grazing Isolde's arm, leaving a burn that smoked through her habit. Clara's heart pounded, a rosary searing in her pocket, its scorched beads a relentless reminder of the curse that bound them. Elias led the way, his knife drawn, his lantern swinging widely, casting shadows that danced like demons on the walls. Isolde stumbled, her face pale, clutching the book she'd reclaimed, its serpent cross cover glinting ominously. "Keep moving." Elias barked, kicking the chapel's hidden panel shut as they emerged, but the wood shuddered under an unseen force, splintering as if clawed by spectral hands. The chapel was no refuge, candles flickered as if bowing to the Wraith's will, their flames casting grotesque shapes across the stained glass windows. The crucifix above the altar tilted further, its shadow warping into a veiled silhouette, and Clara's stomach churned, the whisper roaring in her ears, "No escape." She grabbed Isolde's arm, pulling her toward the cloister, but Isolde's eyes were wide with terror, her breath hitching. "I didn't mean for this," she gasped, her voice breaking, but Clara's anger flared, tempered only by fear. "You chose Benedict," she snapped, her words sharp despite the chaos. They burst into the cloister, its stone arches looming like the ribs of a giant beast, the night air cold and heavy with the scent of impending rain. Elias barred the chapel door, but the Wraith's presence seeped through, a chill that sank into their bones. "The archive," he said, his voice low, urgent. "We need to decode that book." Clara nodded, her mind racing, Ruth's death, the mural, the phrase "the nun's prayer binds the flame." The book was their only lead, but Isolde clutched it tighter, her eyes darting as if expecting betrayal. The whisper surged, a chorus now, and Clara's rosary burned hotter, its heat blistering her skin through her habit. They ran, the convent's halls a maze of shadows, the Wraith's laughter trailing them like a hunter stalking prey. As they reached the archive, Elias shut the door shut, barricading it with a heavy shelf. The room was a fragile sanctuary, its shelves sagging under dusty tomes, its air thick with the scent of decay. Clara sank against a wall, her breath ragged, her rosary clutched in her trembling hand. Isolde stood apart, her guilt a palpable weight, the book still in her grasp. Elias spread the coded letter and journal on the table, his eyes fierce. "This ends when we understand the ritual," he said, but his voice held a trace of doubt, and Clara saw the Wraith's shadow flicker through the keyhole, its burning eyes locking onto her. She gasped, and Elias followed her gaze, his knife flashing, but the shadow vanished, leaving only the whisper's mocking chant, "You are mine." The archive room was a crypt of flickering candlelight, its silence broken by the distant moan of the convent's ancient timbers. Clara sat against a shelf, her rosary clutched tightly, its scorched beads leaving faint burns on her palm. Elias paced, his rugged features taut with determination, the coded letter, Margaret's journal, and Benedict's book spread before him like pieces of a shattered mosaic. Isolde hovered near the door, her face pale, her guilt isolating her like a wall of glass. The horror in the passage had shaken them all, the Wraith's touch on Isolde a warning of its growing power. Clara's mind churned, Ruth's blistered hand, the mural's chained figure, Isolde's betrayal. The whisper lingered, a low hum, "She lies." A sharp knock shattered the tension. Mother Agnes, her black habit sweeping the floor, stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury and fear. Her eyes, usually cold and unyielding, flickered with something deeper, a shadow of despair. "You've defiled sacred ground," she said, her voice low, venomous, but it trembled, betraying her. Elias stepped forward, his gaze hard. "Another nun is dead, Mother. Ruth, burned like the others. You know what's killing them." Agnes's lips tightened, but Clara stood, her voice trembling but firm. "What is the nun's prayer, Mother? Why does it haunt us?" The question hung heavy, and Agnes's gaze softened, not with warmth but with a weary resignation, as if a long-held burden had finally broken her. She closed the door, her hands shaking, and leaned against it, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was never meant to be this way," she said, her eyes distant, lost in memory. "Decades ago, a plague swept Thornwick. The village was dying, and the convent was their last hope. I was young, a novice, desperate to save them. I found a prayer in an ancient text, a ritual to summon a guardian spirit. I prayed, begged, and it answered, but not with God's light." Clara's heart sank, the whisper hissing, "Liar." Agnes continued, her voice breaking. "It was a spirit of fire and despair, bound to the convent. It saved the village, but it hungered, fed on our sorrow. I sealed the catacombs to contain it, but the prayer lives in our walls, in our souls." Elias's jaw tightened, his voice sharp. "And you let nuns die to keep your secret?" Agnes's eyes blazed, but her shoulders sagged. "I protected the many," she said, but her words were hollow, a justification worn thin by guilt. Clara clutched her rosary, its heat searing, and glanced at Isolde, who stood silent, her eyes downcast, the book still in her hand. A shadow moved in the corridor, and Clara's breath caught, the Wraith, its veiled form gliding past the door, its eyes like embers. Agnes didn't turn, but her face paled, as if she felt its gaze. "Leave the catacombs alone," she warned, her voice a plea. "Or you'll unleash it fully." The whisper laughed, and Clara knew Agnes was hiding more, a truth buried deeper than the catacombs themselves. A storm broke over the Yorkshire moors, its thunder shaking the convent's ancient stones, its rain lashing the courtyard like a divine judgment. Clara and Elias stood outside, the archive's revelations burning in their minds, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and ozone. Isolde had stayed behind, her guilt a barrier she couldn't cross, while Agnes had retreated to the chapel, a confession a half-truth that left more questions than answers. The Wraith's presence lingered, a weight in the air, its whisper a chorus now, "You are mine." Clara's habit clung to her skin, her dark hair plastered to her face, but her green eyes were fierce, a fire that no storm could quench. "We can't stop," she said, her voice cutting through the roar of the rain. "Not until it's gone." Elias nodded, his coat soaked, his knife glinting in the lightning's flash. His rugged features were set with resolve, but his eyes held a trace of fear, not for himself, but for her. "Then we find the catacombs," he said, his voice steady. "We end this ritual, whatever it takes." He stepped closer, the rain blurring the space between them, and his hand brushed hers, a moment of defiance against the convent's vows. Clara didn't pull away, her heart racing, not from the storm but from the dangerous warmth of his touch. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the wind. "This isn't your fight." Elias's gaze held hers, unyielding, a soldier's oath in his eyes. "It is now," he said, and their fingers intertwined, a silent vow sealed in the rain, a bond that defied the curse and the convent's walls. The whisper surged, a mocking laugh, and a shadow flickered at the courtyard's edge, the Wraith, its veiled form standing beneath a stone arch, its eyes burning through the storm. Clara gasped, a rosary searing through her habit, and Elias drew his knife, stepping in front of her, his body a shield. The Wraith didn't move, its head tilting as if savoring their defiance, then vanished as lightning struck, leaving only the echo of its laughter. Clara's breath hitched, but Elias's grip on her hand tightened, grounding her. "We'll face it together," he said, his voice a lifeline. They turned back to the convent, its towers looming like sentinels, their shadows stretching across the wet stone. As they stepped inside, a bell tolled, low and mournful, its sound reverberating through the halls. Clara glanced up, her heart sinking. Father Benedict stood in a window above, his silver hair glinting, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on them. The storm raged on, but the true tempest lay ahead, in the catacombs below, where the nun's prayer waited to claim its due. Clara clutched her rosary, its heat a promise of pain, and steeled herself for the darkness to come, knowing that the Wraith was not just a spirit, but a mirror to the sins they all carried. The storm had retreated, leaving St. Agnes Convent shrouded in a mist that clung to its ancient stones like a mourner's veil. The courtyard, still slick with rain, reflected the faint glow of dawn, but the air was heavy, charged with the Wraith's lingering malice. Sister Clara Voss stood at the chapel's entrance, her habit damp, her dark hair escaping her wimple in defiant curls. Her green eyes burned with resolve, though the rosary in her pocket seared her skin, its scorched beads a constant reminder of the curse that bound her to this place. Detective Elias Kane stood beside her, his grey coat soaked, his rugged features set with determination. His knife glinted at his belt, a soldier's weapon against a foe that defied steel. Mother Agnes's confession, the nun's prayer as a ritual that summoned a spirit of fire and despair, had cracked the convent's facade, but her warning about the catacombs echoed, "Leave them alone, or you'll unleash it fully." Clara's heart pounded, the whisper a relentless chant in her ears, "Find me." She glanced at Elias, his presence a forbidden anchor, their oath in the rain a vow she couldn't break. "The catacombs are our only chance," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling within her. Elias nodded, his eyes scanning the chapel's shadowed arches. "Then we go now, before Agnes or Benedict stop us." Sister Isolde was absent, her betrayal in the passage a wound still raw, her allegiance to Father Benedict a shadow over their trust. The book she'd carried, marked with the serpent cross, lay in Elias's leather case, its crimson phrase, "The nun's prayer binds the flame," a riddle they had yet to solve. They slipped into the chapel, the air thick with the scent of wax and decay, the crucifix above the altar now hanging askew, as if rejecting its own sanctity. Clara knelt at the altar's base, her fingers finding the serpent cross symbol, and pressed it. The hidden panel groaned, revealing the narrow stair that led to the passage below. Elias lit his lantern, its light swallowed by the darkness, and they descended, the stair spiraling into a realm of damp stone and silence. The walls were carved with symbols, crosses, serpents, and eyes that seemed to watch their every step. The whisper grew louder, a chorus now, urging Clara deeper, and her rosary burned, its heat blistering through her habit. Elias's hand brushed hers, a fleeting reassurance, but his jaw was tight, his eyes wary of the shadows that danced beyond the lantern's reach. The passage opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness, its floor littered with broken relics, crucifixes, rosaries, and bones, their surfaces edged with burns. At the chamber's center stood an altar, not of stone but of blackened wood, its surface carved with the serpent cross, surrounded by symbols that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Clara's breath caught, the mural from the passage vivid in her mind, a nun binding a veiled figure in chains. "This is it," she whispered, her voice echoing. Elias approached the altar, his fingers tracing a groove filled with ash. "This isn't holy," he said, his voice low. "It's a trap." The whisper roared, and a shadow moved at the chamber's edge, the Wraith, its veiled form gliding through the dark, its eyes like embers. Clara clutched her rosary, its heat unbearable, and Elias drew his knife, but the Wraith vanished, its laughter a promise of horrors to come. The catacombs chamber was a frozen heart, its air thick with the weight of ancient sins. Clara stood before the blackened altar, her rosary searing her palm, the Wraith's laughter still echoing in her ears. Elias circled the altar, his lantern casting jagged shadows, his knife held ready, though he knew steel was no match for the spirit that haunted them. The serpent cross symbol pulsed, its lines glowing faintly, and Clara's mind churned with Agnes's confession, the mural's chained figure, and the book's cryptic phrase. The whisper was relentless, no longer a chant but a voice, clear and accusing, "You called me." Her heart raced, a memory stirring, something from before the convent, a shadow she buried deep. She stepped closer to the altar, drawn by an unseen force, and touched the serpent cross. The world shifted, the chamber dissolving into a vision that clawed at her soul. She was no longer in the catacombs but in a London townhouse, 3 years ago, her dark hair loose, her hands stained with tears. A man knelt before her, his face handsome but pale, his eyes pleading, Thomas, her betrothed, a doctor who'd loved her fiercely. "Clara, we can leave," he said, his voice desperate. "Start over, away from your family's debts." But Clara's heart was heavy, her father's ruin a chain around her neck. She'd prayed that night, alone in her room, a forbidden prayer from a book she'd found in her father's study, a ritual called the nun's prayer, promising salvation. The whisper had answered, and the next morning, Thomas was dead, his body found in the Thames, his hands burned as if clutching a rosary. Clara gasped, the vision shattering, and she stumbled, collapsing against the altar. Elias caught her, his arms strong, his voice urgent. "Clara, what's wrong?" Her eyes were wild, tears streaming down her face. "It's me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I called it. 3 years ago, I prayed, and it took him." Elias's jaw tightened, but his gaze softened, a soldier's strength tempered by compassion. "You didn't know," he said, his hand cupping her face, a forbidding gesture that sent a shiver through her. "Whatever it is, we'll stop it together." Clara clung to him, her vows fraying, but the whisper laughed, and the altar's symbols flared, casting a crimson glow across the chamber. Footsteps echoed from the passage, sharp and deliberate. Elias released Clara, his knife flashing, and they turned to see Father Benedict, his silver hair glinting, his crucifix gleaming like a blade. "You've gone too far," he said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "The prayer is not yours to undo." Clara's heart sank. Benedict's presence confirmed her fears, his role in the curse far deeper than Agnes's. Elias stepped forward, his voice cold. "What do you know, Father?" Benedict's smile was a predator's, and the whisper surged, a warning. "He binds the flame." The wraith flickered at the chamber's edge, its eyes locked on Clara, and she knew the truth was close, but so was the cost. The catacombs chamber pulsed with a malevolent energy, its blackened altar a beacon that drew the wraith's gaze. Clara stood beside Elias, her rosary burning through her habit, the vision of her past a wound that bled anew. Elias faced Father Benedict, his knife steady, his eyes fierce, a soldier ready for battle. Benedict's presence was a storm, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes commanding, but his smile hid a darkness that matched the wraith's. The serpent cross on the altar glowed, its light casting shadows that twisted like serpents across the bone-strewn floor. The whisper was a chorus, relentless, "The flame burns for you." Clara's heart pounded, her guilt over Thomas's death intertwining with the fear that she'd doomed them all. "You don't understand the prayer," Benedict said, his voice smooth, almost reverent, as he stepped closer to the altar. "It's power, not a curse. A spirit bound to serve, to protect." Elias's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "Protect? It's killed nuns, burned them alive." Benedict's smile didn't waver, but his eyes gleamed with a fanatic zeal. "Sacrifices," he said, his hand brushing the crucifix at his chest. "The flame demands despair to burn brightly." Clara's stomach churned, Agnes's confession echoing, it fed on sorrow. Benedict's words confirmed it, he wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating the ritual, using the wraith for his own ends. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "What did you do to Isolde?" she demanded, the memory of her friend's betrayal sharp. Benedict's gaze flicked to her, his smile tightening. "She sought protection, like you. But faith is weak without sacrifice." The whisper surged, and Clara's rosary flared, its heat unbearable. She gasped, dropping it, and the beads scattered across the floor, each one glowing with a faint, crimson light. Elias grabbed her arm, pulling her back, but the wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding from the shadows, its skeletal hand reaching for the altar. Benedict didn't flinch, his eyes locked on the spirit, as if greeting an old ally. Elias lunged, his knife slashing at the wraith, but it dissolved, reappearing behind Clara, its eyes burning into hers. She screamed, and Elias tackled her to the ground, shielding her as the altar's symbols erupted in flames, a heatless fire that illuminated the chamber. Benedict laughed, his voice rising over the chaos. "You can't stop it," he shouted, raising his crucifix, its surface now etched with the serpent cross. The flames surged, and the Wraith's laughter joined the whisper, a cacophony that shook the catacombs. Clara clung to Elias, her fear tempered by his presence, and whispered a prayer, not the nun's prayer, but one of her own, for strength, for redemption. The flames died as suddenly as they'd appeared, leaving the chamber dark, the altar smoldering. Benedict was gone, his footsteps fading into the passage, but the Wraith lingered, its eyes fixed on Clara. Elias helped her stand, his hand lingering on hers, a silent promise. "We're not done," he said, his voice a vow. Clara nodded, her rosary abandoned on the floor, its beads still glowing faintly, a beacon in the dark. The catacombs held the key to the Wraith's power, but also to Clara's past, and she knew the path ahead would demand more than faith, it would demand blood. The catacombs beneath St. Agnes Convent were a labyrinth of shadows, their air thick with the stench of decay and ash. Clara Voss stood in the chamber of the blackened altar, her breath shallow, her habit clinging to her skin from the damp. The rosary she'd dropped lay scattered across the floor, its beads glowing faintly, each burn mark a scar of the Wraith's touch. Detective Elias Kane crouched beside her, his lantern casting a frail light across the bone-strewn ground, his knife still drawn, though its steel felt futile against the spirit that haunted them. Father Benedict's escape into the passage left a void of dread, his words, "The flame demands despair," echoing like a dark prophecy. The Wraith's fleeting presence lingered, its laughter a whisper that curled through the chamber, merging with the chant in Clara's ears, "You cannot run." Clara's vision of her past, her desperate prayer, Thomas's death, weighed on her, a guilt that made the Wraith's gaze feel personal, as if it had been born from her sin. She knelt, gathering the rosary's beads, wincing as their heat stung her fingers. One bead was different, larger, etched with a tiny inscription, Ignis Vincit, Latin for "Fire Conquers." She showed it to Elias, her voice trembling. "This isn't mine," she said, her green eyes wide with fear. Elias examined it, his rugged face tense. "It's a relic," he said, his voice low. "Maybe a key to the ritual." He slipped it into his leather case, alongside the coded letter and Benedict's book, their pages marked with the serpent cross and the phrase "The nun's prayer binds the flame." They moved deeper into the catacombs, following the passage Benedict had fled through, its walls narrowing, the symbols, crosses, serpents, and eyes, growing denser, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat. The whisper grew louder, a voice now, "Seek the flame." Clara's heart raced, her guilt over Thomas mingling with fear of what lay ahead. Elias led, his lantern revealing a fork in the passage, one path leading to a faint glow, the other to darkness. "Which way?" he asked, glancing at Clara. She hesitated, the whisper urging her toward the light, but her instincts screamed of danger. Before she could answer, a scream echoed from the glowing path, a woman's cry, sharp and desperate, cut off abruptly. They ran, the passage twisting, the air growing warmer, as if drawing them into a furnace. The glow intensified, revealing a smaller chamber, its walls scorched black, its floor marked with a circle of ash. At its center lay a shattered reliquary, its glass shards glinting, a single bone within, burned but intact. Clara's breath caught, a relic, like her rosary bead, but older, radiating a heat that made her skin prickle. Elias approached, but the Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the ash, its eyes like twin flames. Clara screamed, and Elias pulled her back, his knife slashing uselessly as the Wraith's hand reached for the bone. The whisper roared, "Take it." Clara lunged, grabbing the bone, its heat searing her palm, and the Wraith vanished, its laughter echoing as the chamber's walls trembled, threatening to collapse. Elias pulled her toward the dark passage, his arm around her, a forbidden shield against the darkness, but Clara knew the relic was both a clue and a curse, drawing them deeper into the Wraith's domain. The dark passage twisted through the catacombs, its walls closing in, the air thick with the scent of ash and fear. Clara clutched the burned bone, its heat pulsing against her palm, a relic that tied her to the nun's prayer and the Wraith's hunger. Elias led, his lantern a beacon in the suffocating dark, his knife ready, though his rugged face betrayed a growing unease. The scream they'd heard haunted them, its abrupt end a warning of the Wraith's reach. Clara's mind churned, her vision of Thomas, Benedict's fanaticism, the relic's inscription, Ignis Vincit. The whisper was relentless, a voice now, "You are the flame." Her guilt over her betrothed's death felt like a chain, binding her to the spirit that stalked them. They emerged into a wider chamber, its ceiling vaulted, its walls lined with alcoves holding skeletal remains, each clutching a rosary, their beads scorched. A stone table stood at the center, carved with the serpent cross, stained with what looked like blood. Clara's heart sank. The catacombs were not just a prison but a shrine to the Wraith's sacrifices. Elias set the lantern down, his eyes scanning the alcoves, his voice low. "These nuns didn't die naturally," he said, his fingers tracing a burn mark on a skull. "They were chosen." Clara's breath hitched, Agnes's confession echoing, it fed on despair. The relic in her hand grew warmer, and she set it on the table, its glow illuminating a faint inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, sacrifice of fire. Before they could decipher it, footsteps echoed from the passage, hesitant, uneven. Clara tensed, her hand reaching for Elias, but it was Sister Isolde who emerged, her face pale, her habit torn, her arm bandaged where the Wraith had burned her. Her sharp features were etched with guilt, her eyes avoiding Clara's. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Isolde whispered, her voice breaking. "Benedict said the book would save us." Clara's anger flared, but pity tempered it. Isolde was a pawn, manipulated by Benedict's lies. "What did he tell you?" Clara asked, her voice steady but laced with pain. Isolde hesitated, then spoke, her words tumbling out. "He said the prayer binds a spirit to protect the convent, but it needs offerings. Souls. He gave me the book to keep you away from the catacombs." Elias's jaw tightened, his voice sharp. "And you trusted him?" Isolde's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling. "I was afraid," she admitted, glancing at Clara, a plea in her gaze. Clara's heart ached, torn between betrayal and the memory of Isolde's laughter, their shared moments in the convent's darkness. The whisper surged, mocking, "She is weak." The relic's glow flared, and the Wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding from an alcove, its skeletal hand reaching for Isolde. Clara screamed, pushing Isolde behind her, and Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife passing through smoke. The spirit vanished, but the chamber's walls groaned, and the whisper chanted, "Give her to me." Clara clutched the relic, its heat searing, and knew Isolde's confession was only the beginning. The Wraith's hunger was growing, and they were all its prey. The catacombs chamber was a grave of flickering shadows, its skeletal alcove staring with empty sockets, the stone table at its center a silent witness to the Wraith's sacrifices. Clara stood beside Elias, the burned bone relic in her hand, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a chilling echo of Benedict's words about sacrifices. Isolde cowered behind them, her bandaged arm trembling, her confession a fragile bridge over the chasm of her betrayal. The Wraith's brief appearance had left a chill in the air, its laughter merging with the whisper that haunted Clara, "Feed the flame." Her guilt over Thomas's death, her role in summoning the Wraith, felt like a noose tightening, and the relic's heat was a brand, marking her as its chosen. Elias's lantern flickered, its light struggling against the darkness, his rugged face set with determination but his eyes betraying a soldier's weariness. He examined the table, his fingers tracing the blood-stained serpent cross, his voice low. "This is where they died," he said, glancing at the alcoves. "Nuns, offered to this thing." Clara's stomach churned, Agnes's and Isolde's confessions converging. The nun's prayer bound a spirit that fed on despair, and Benedict was its keeper. Isolde's voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. "He said it was necessary," she murmured, her eyes downcast. "To keep the convent safe." Clara's anger flared, but Elias cut in, his voice sharp. "Safe? He's feeding its souls." Before Clara could respond, a low groan echoed through the chamber, and the walls trembled, dust raining from the ceiling. The whisper surged, a command, "Look." Clara's gaze darted to the far wall, where a crimson glow emerged, revealing words scrawled in blood, "The flame demands 3." Her heart stopped. The 3 dead nuns, Margaret, Ruth, and another before them, their burns a testament to the Wraith's hunger. Elias approached the wall, his knife drawn, but the blood seemed fresh, dripping, as if written moments ago. 3, he muttered, his voice tense. "It's not done." The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the floor, its eyes like twin furnaces, its skeletal hands outstretched. Clara screamed, clutching the relic, and Elias shoved her and Isolde behind the table, his knife slashing at the spirit. The Wraith's laughter shook the chamber, and the blood on the wall flared, the words burning into the stone. Isolde sobbed, collapsing, her bandaged arm bleeding through, and Clara knelt beside her, torn between fear and compassion. "Stay with me," Clara whispered, her voice breaking, but the Wraith glided closer, its eyes locked on Isolde, as if drawn to her despair. Elias grabbed a broken crucifix from an alcove, thrusting it at the Wraith, its serpent cross glowing faintly. The spirit recoiled, its laughter turning to a hiss, and the chamber's flames died, plunging them into darkness. Clara's relic pulsed, its heat guiding her hand, and she pressed it against the table symbol, a desperate act. A low rumble echoed, and a hidden door creaked open, revealing another passage, its air colder, heavier. Elias pulled Clara and Isolde through, the Wraith's eyes burning behind them, its whisper a promise, 3 will fall. Clara's heart raced, the relic a burning weight, and she knew the Wraith's demand was not just for souls, but for hers, bound by the prayer she'd once uttered in despair. The catacombs beneath St. Agnes Convent were a maze of despair, their passages twisting like veins through the earth's cold heart. Clara Voss, Detective Elias Kane, and Sister Isolde fled through the newly opened door, the Wraith's burning eyes still seared into their minds, its laughter a relentless echo. The air was frigid, heavy with the scent of mold and something sharper, blood, perhaps, or the residue of ancient rituals. Clara clutched the burned bone relic, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, pulsing with heat, a beacon that both guided and condemned her. Her habit clung to her skin, damp with sweat and fear, her green eyes wide with the weight of her guilt over Thomas's death and the Wraith's demand, the flame demands 3. Elias led, his lantern swinging, its light carving a frail path through the darkness, his knife drawn, his rugged face set with a soldier's resolve. Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm bleeding through, her sharp features etched with guilt, her betrayal a shadow that clung to her like the Wraith itself. The passage narrowed, its walls etched with symbols, serpents, crosses, and eyes that seemed to follow them, their glow intensifying with each step. The whisper was a chorus, relentless, "Give me the weak." Clara's heart pounded, Isolde's confession ringing in her ears, Benedict's manipulation, the book's promise of protection, the Wraith's hunger for souls. She glanced at Isolde, torn between anger and pity, but the passage offered no time for reconciliation. A low rumble shook the ground, and Elias halted, his lantern revealing a trap, a section of the floor, marked with the serpent cross, sagging under an unseen weight. "Careful," he warned, testing the stone with his boot. It crumbled, revealing a pit below, its depths glinting with shards of bone and metal, relics of past victims. Clara's breath caught, the whisper urging, "Jump." She shook it off, helping Isolde navigate the edge, their hands brushing, a fleeting moment of connection shattered by a scream from behind, a guttural cry, not human, but the Wraith's. It appeared, its veiled form gliding through the wall, its skeletal hands outstretched, its eyes like twin furnaces. Elias shoved Clara and Isolde forward, his knife slashing at the spirit, but it dissolved, reappearing ahead, blocking the passage. "Run," he shouted, and they scrambled past the trap, the floor trembling, stones falling from the ceiling. Clara clutched the relic, its heat searing, and tripped, her knee striking the ground. Elias pulled her up, his arm around her, a forbidden shield that sent a shiver through her despite the terror. They reached a fork, one path glowing faintly, the other dark. The Wraith's laughter echoed, and Isolde sobbed, her strength crumbling. "It wants me," she whispered, her eyes wild. Clara gripped her hand, her voice firm. "We won't let it." Elias chose the dark path, his lantern flickering, and the passage closed behind them, the Wraith's eyes burning through the stone. The whisper chanted, "3 will fall." Clara's relic pulsed, a warning, and she knew the trap was not just stone, but the Wraith's design, drawing them deeper into its lair. The dark passage stretched endlessly, its walls slick with moisture, its air a suffocating weight that pressed against Clara's chest. She followed Elias, the relic in her hand a burning anchor, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a riddle tied to the Wraith's hunger. Elias's lantern flickered, its light barely piercing the gloom, his knife a constant in his grip, his rugged face etched with determination but shadowed by doubt. Isolde trailed, her steps uneven, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her guilt a palpable force that slowed her. The Wraith's scream lingered, its demand, the flame demands 3, a prophecy that haunted them all. Clara's mind churned, her vision of Thomas's death merging with Agnes's confession and Benedict's fanaticism, the whisper a relentless voice, "You are the flame." The passage opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling a dome of jagged stone, its walls lined with niches holding charred relics, rosaries, crucifixes, and bones, each marked with the serpent cross. At the center stood a stone pillar, its surface carved with symbols that glowed crimson, a brazier atop it flickering with a heatless flame. Clara's breath caught. This was no altar, but a ritual site, a heart where the nun's prayer was born. Elias approached, his lantern revealing a circle of ash around the pillar, stained with blood, its edges marked with 3 crosses. 3, he muttered, his voice tense, echoing the blood-scrawled warning. Clara's heart sank, the Wraith's victims, Margaret, Ruth, and another, their despair feeding the flame. A low chant echoed, and Father Benedict emerged from a shadowed niche, his silver hair glinting, his crucifix glowing with the serpent cross. His blue eyes burned with zeal, his voice smooth but chilling. "You found the heart of the prayer," he said, stepping into the circle, his hands raised. "The flame protects, but it demands." Clara's stomach twisted, her voice sharp. "You're killing them, Benedict." "For what?" "Power." He smiled, a predator's grin. "Not power, sister. Salvation. The Wraith is a guardian, bound by the prayer, but it requires fuel, souls steeped in despair." Elias stepped forward, his knife flashing. "You're a murderer," he growled, but Benedict's chant grew louder, the brazier's flame flaring, casting shadows that writhed like serpents. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the ash, its eyes locked on Isolde, who sobbed, collapsing against the wall. Clara lunged, shielding her, the relic burning in her hand. "Stop this," she cried, but Benedict's chant intensified, and the flame surged, a wall of fire separating them. Elias grabbed Clara, pulling her back, his arm around her, a forbidden anchor that steadied her heart. The Wraith glided toward Isolde, its skeletal hand reaching, but Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and the spirit recoiled, its laughter turning to a hiss. Benedict's eyes widened, his chant faltering, and the flame died, the chamber plunging into darkness. Elias's lantern flickered back to life, revealing Benedict's escape into another passage, but the Wraith lingered, its eyes on Clara, the whisperer promised, "You will burn." The chamber of the stone pillar was a frozen hell, its crimson glow fading, the brazier's flame extinguished, but the Wraith's presence clung like frost. Clara stood beside Elias, the relic in her hand a searing weight, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the ritual that bound the Wraith. Isolde leaned against the wall, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features crumpled with fear and guilt, her confession a fragile thread in the tapestry of betrayal. Benedict's escape left a void of dread, his chant, "The flame protects," a lie that masked his true intent, to feed the Wraith, to wield its power. The whisper was a relentless chorus, "Give me her heart." Clara's guilt over Thomas's death, her role in summoning the Wraith, felt like a blade at her throat, and the relic's heat was a brand, marking her as its chosen. Elias's lantern cast jagged shadows, his knife still drawn, his rugged face a mask of resolve, but his eyes betrayed a soldier's weariness, a man fighting a war he couldn't fully understand. He examined the pillar, its symbols pulsing faintly, his voice low. "This is where it feeds," he said, glancing at the ash circle, the blood stains, the 3 crosses. "Benedict's using the Wraith, but why?" Clara's mind raced, Agnes's confession merging with Isolde's. The prayer binds a spirit, but it needs offerings. She glanced at Isolde, her heart torn between anger and sorrow. "What else did Benedict tell you?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with pain. Isolde's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. He said, "I was chosen. That my despair would strengthen the flame." Clara's stomach churned, realizing Benedict had manipulated Isolde's feelings for her, her jealousy of Elias, to feed the Wraith. "You're not his," Clara said, stepping closer, but Isolde recoiled, her voice breaking. "I gave him your journal, Clara. Your prayers, your doubts. He used them." Clara froze, her journal, a record of her guilt over Thomas, her forbidden thoughts about Elias, now a weapon in Benedict's hands. The whisper laughed, and the Wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding from the pillar, its eyes locked on Isolde, drawn to her despair. Elias lunged, thrusting the relic at the Wraith, its glow flaring, and the spirit recoiled, its laughter a hiss. Clara grabbed Isolde, pulling her toward the passage, but the chamber's walls groaned, and a hidden door slammed shut, trapping them. The Wraith surged, its skeletal hand grazing Clara's arm, burning through her habit. She screamed, and Elias tackled the spirit, his knife useless, but his defiance a shield. The relic fell, its glow illuminating a new inscription on the pillar, Coarded, the heart burns. Clara's heart raced. The Wraith didn't just want souls, it wanted her heart, her despair, her love. Elias pulled her and Isolde back, the Wraith's eyes burning, and smashed the brazier, its ashes scattering, opening another passage. They fled, the whisper chanting, "The heart is mine." Clara knew Isolde's betrayal was a mirror to her own, and the Wraith's hunger would spare no one. The catacombs beneath St. Agnes Convent were a suffocating abyss, their passages coiling like the entrails of some ancient beast. Clara Voss, Detective Elias Kane, and Sister Isolde stumbled through the newly opened passage, the Wraith's burning eyes and mocking laughter still clawing at their minds. The air was thick with the stench of ash and blood, the walls slick with moisture that glistened like tears in the dim glow of Elias's lantern. Clara clutched the burn relic, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, searing her palm, tethered to the nun's prayer and the Wraith's insatiable hunger. Her habit was torn, her dark hair escaping her wimple in wild curls, her green eyes haunted by the revelation of Isolde's betrayal, her journal, her private confessions, now in Benedict's hands. Elias led, his knife drawn, his rugged face etched with determination, though his soldier's instincts faltered against a foe that defied mortal weapons. Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features crumpled with guilt, her whispered confession, "I gave him your journal," a wound that bled between them. The passage twisted, its walls carved with serpent crosses and eyes that pulsed with a crimson glow, as if the catacombs themselves were alive, watching. The whisper was a relentless voice, clear and seductive, "Come to me." Clara's heart pounded, her guilt over Thomas's death, her desperate prayer that summoned the Wraith, merging with the fear that her heart, her despair, was its true target. The inscription Coarded, the heart burns, etched on the pillar haunted her, a prophecy of her own damnation. Elias paused, his lantern revealing a narrow bridge over a chasm, its depths lost in darkness, the faint clatter of bones echoing below. "Stay close," he warned, his voice low, his eyes flicking to Clara, a silent vow of protection that sent a forbidden warmth through her. As they crossed, the Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the chasm, its skeletal hands trailing smoke, its eyes like twin furnaces. Clara gasped, the relic burning hotter, and Isolde screamed, collapsing to her knees, her despair a beacon to the spirit. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife passing through it, but Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and the spirit recoiled, its laughter a hiss. The bridge trembled, stones crumbling into the abyss, and Elias grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her across, his strength a lifeline. Isolde staggered behind, her sobs echoing, and Clara reached for her, their hands brushing, a fleeting moment of forgiveness shattered by the Wraith's return. It surged, its hand grazing Isolde's back, burning through her habit, and she screamed, falling forward. Elias caught her, his arm around both women, a shield against the darkness, but the Wraith vanished, its whisper chanting, "The heart is mine." They reached the other side, collapsing against the wall, the chasm's edge a reminder of how close they'd come to death. Clara's relic pulsed, its heat guiding her gaze to a sealed door, its surface carved with a serpent cross and the words Ignis Cor, fire of the heart. The whisper urged, "Open it." Elias examined the door, his fingers tracing a lock shaped like the relic's bone. "This is it," he said, his voice tense. Clara nodded, her fear tempered by Elias's presence, but the Wraith's law was clear. It wanted her heart, and the door was its trap. The catacombs passage was a frozen vein, its sealed door a gate to the Wraith's heart. Clara stood before it, the burned bone relic in her hand, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the ritual that bound the Wraith. The words Ignis Cor carved above the doorpost with a crimson glow, echoing the pillar's core arded, a chilling reminder that the Wraith craved her despair, her love, her soul. Elias Kane crouched beside her, his lantern casting jagged shadows, his knife ready, his rugged face a mask of resolve, though his eyes betrayed a soldier's fear, not for himself, but for her. Isolde sat against the wall, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features etched with guilt, her confession about Clara's journal a wound that festered. The whisper was relentless, a seductive voice, "Read it." Clara's heart raced, her journal, her confessions of guilt over Thomas's death, her forbidden thoughts about Elias, now a weapon in Benedict's hands. Elias pulled the leather case from his coat, revealing the coded letter, Margaret's journal, and Benedict's book, but Clara's gaze fell on a small notebook, its cover worn, its pages filled with her own handwriting. Isolde's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "He took it from my cell," she whispered, her guilt raw. "I didn't know he'd use it like this." Clara's anger flared, but pity tempered it. Isolde was a pawn, her jealousy of Elias exploited by Benedict's lies. She took the journal, her fingers trembling, and opened it, the whisper urging, "Know yourself." The pages were a mirror to her soul, her despair after Thomas's death, her prayer to the nun's prayer, her doubts about her vows, her growing feelings for Elias. One entry stood out, written in a frantic scrawl, "I prayed for salvation, and it answered. Thomas burned, and I fled to St. Agnes, but the fire follows me." Clara's breath hitched, the vision of Thomas's death vivid, his hands burned, his body in the Thames. The whisper laughed, and the relic flared, its heat searing her palm. Elias's hand covered hers, his voice low, grounding. "You didn't know," he said, his eyes fierce with compassion. "You're not its puppet." Clara clung to him, her vows fraying, but the door's glow intensified, and the whisper chanted, "The heart burns." Isolde stood, her voice desperate. "Benedict said your despair strengthens it," she said, her eyes pleading. "Your love for him." Clara froze, the journal's truth ablaid. Her feelings for Elias were not just forbidden, but fuel for the Wraith. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding through the door, its eyes locked on Clara, drawn to her heart. Elias thrust the relic at it, its glow flaring, and the spirit recoiled, but the door creaked open, revealing a chamber bathed in crimson light. Clara's heart pounded, the journal a weight in her hand, and she knew the truth, her love was a curse, and the Wraith would claim it unless she faced the fire within. The chamber beyond the sealed door was a crucible of crimson light, its walls scorched black, its air thick with the scent of sulfur and despair. Clara, Elias, and Isolde stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind them, the Wraith's laughter a chilling echo. The relic in Clara's hand burned, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the ritual that pulsed at the chamber's heart. A massive altar dominated the space, carved from obsidian, its surface etched with serpent crosses and eyes that glowed like embers, surrounded by a circle of flames that burned without heat. Clara's heart raced, the journal's truth, her love for Elias as fuel for the Wraith, merging with the inscription's Ignis Cor and Cor Ardit, a prophecy of her own sacrifice. Elias held his lantern, its light swallowed by the crimson glow, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce but shadowed by fear. Isolde clung to the wall, her bandaged arm bleeding, her guilt a beacon to the Wraith's hunger. The altar's flames flared, revealing a figure, Father Benedict, his silver hair gleaming, his crucifix glowing with the serpent cross, his blue eyes burning with fanaticism. "You've come to the flame," he said, his voice smooth, a chant that echoed the whisper, "Burn for me." Clara's stomach churned, his role clear. He was the keeper, feeding the Wraith souls to wield its power. "Stop this," she demanded, her voice trembling but firm, the relic raised like a shield. Benedict laughed, his hands tracing the altar's symbols, the flames surging. "The Wraith is salvation," he said. "It protects Saint Agnes, but it demands hearts, 3, to bind it fully." Elias stepped forward, his knife flashing. "You're a monster," he growled, but Benedict's chant intensified, and a Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the flames, its skeletal hands outstretched, its eyes locked on Clara. Isolde screamed, collapsing, her despair drawing the spirit, and Clara lunged, shielding her, the relic flaring. The Wraith recoiled, but Benedict's chant grew louder, and the flames formed a cage, trapping them. Elias slashed at the fire, his knife useless, and grabbed Clara's hand, his touch a forbidden anchor. "We end this now," he said, his voice a vow, and Clara nodded, her fear tempered by his strength. The altar's symbols glowed, revealing a hidden groove shaped like the relic. Clara pressed the bone into it, her hand burning, and the flames parted, the Wraith's laughter turning to a scream. Benedict lunged, his crucifix raised, but Elias tackled him, their struggle a blur in the crimson light. The altar trembled, a crack splitting its surface, and the Wraith surged, its eyes on Clara, the whisper roaring, "Your heart is mine." Clara clutched Elias's hand, her journal falling, its pages burning in the flames, and knew the Wraith's demand was her love, her despair, her soul, but she would fight, for him, for Isolde, for redemption. The chamber of fire beneath St. Agnes Convent was a crucible of crimson light, its obsidian altar a throbbing heart that pulsed with the Wraith's hunger. Clara Voss stood beside Detective Elias Kane, the burned bone relic in her hand, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing brand that tied her to the nun's prayer. The altar's crack, caused by her desperate act, used a viscous, blood-like substance, and the flames around it flickered, as if wounded. Elias's lantern lay shattered, its light replaced by the altar's eerie glow, his knife still drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, though his eyes held a soldier's fear for Clara's safety. Father Benedict sprawled on the ground, his silver hair disheveled, his crucifix, edged with the serpent cross, clutched tightly, his blue eyes blazing with fanaticism despite Elias's tackle. Sister Isolde cowered against the wall, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features crumpled with despair, her betrayal of Clara's journal a chain that bound her to the Wraith's gaze. The whisper roared, a relentless chorus, "Your heart is mine." Clara's heart pounded, the journal's ashes scattered across the floor, her confessions, her guilt over Thomas's death, her forbidden love for Elias, now fuel for the Wraith's flames. The spirit surged, its veiled form rising from the altar's crack, its skeletal hands outstretched, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on her. "Stay back!" Elias shouted, lunging at the Wraith, his knife slashing through smoke, but it glided toward Clara, drawn to her despair. She raised the relic, its glow flaring, and the Wraith recoiled, its laughter a hiss, but the altar trembled violently, stones falling from the ceiling. Benedict laughed, his voice rising over the chaos. "You can't break the prayer," he cried, scrambling to his feet, his crucifix glowing. "The flame needs her heart." Clara's breath hitched, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Audit, a prophecy of her sacrifice. She glanced at Elias, his presence a forbidden anchor, their oath in the rain a vow she couldn't betray. "We end this," she said, her voice trembling but firm, and pressed the relic deeper into the altar's groove. The crack widened, a deafening groan echoing, and the flames surged, forming a wall that separated her from Elias and Isolde. Elias pounded against the fire, his voice desperate. "Clara, no!" Isolde sobbed, her guilt a weight that pinned her, but Clara's resolve hardened, her guilt over Thomas fueling her defiance. The Wraith lunged, its hand grazing her arm, burning through her habit, and she screamed, but held the relic firm, its glow blinding. The altar shattered, a shockwave throwing Clara back, the flames dying, plunging the chamber into darkness. Elias caught her, his arms strong, his breath ragged, a forbidden embrace that steadied her heart. Benedict screamed, pinned beneath a fallen stone, his crucifix shattered, his fanaticism crumbling. The Wraith vanished, its laughter fading, but the whisper lingered, a warning, the heart still burns. Isolde crawled to Clara, her voice broken. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but Clara's eyes were on the altar's ruins, a hidden passage revealed, its air colder, heavier. Elias helped her stand, his hand lingering on hers, a silent promise. "We're not done," he said, and Clara nodded, the relic still burning, a beacon to the Wraith's true lair, but also to her own redemption. The hidden passage beyond the shattered altar was a frozen artery, its walls carved with countless eyes, serpent crosses within irises, that glowed with a sickly crimson light, as if the catacombs themselves were watching, judging. Clara, Elias, and Isolde moved cautiously, the relic in Clara's hand a searing weight, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a constant reminder of the Wraith's demand for her heart. Her habit was scorched, her dark hair loose, her green eyes haunted by the altar's collapse and Benedict's pinned form, his screams still echoing in her mind. Elias led, his knife drawn, his rugged face set with resolve, though his lantern was gone, replaced by the eye's eerie glow. Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her guilt a palpable force, her whispered apology a fragile thread in their fraying bond. The whisper was a low hum, insidious, "See your sin." Clara's heart raced, the journal's ashes a symbol of her exposed heart, her guilt over Thomas's death, her love for Elias now a weapon for the Wraith. The passage narrowed, its ceiling low, forcing them to stoop, the eyes glow intensifying, their pupils seeming to shift, following her. She clutched the relic, its heat blistering, and a vision flickered, a memory of Thomas, his hands burning, his voice pleading, "Why did you pray?" She gasped, stumbling, and Elias caught her arm, his touch grounding, a forbidden spark that warmed her despite the cold. "Stay with me," he said, his voice low, his eyes fierce with concern. Clara nodded, her vows fraying, but the whisper laughed, and the eyes pulsed, their glow revealing a new inscription on the wall, Oculus Ignis, Eye of Fire. Elias traced the words, his fingers coming away dusted with ash. "It's watching us," he muttered, his soldier's instincts screaming of a trap. Isolde's breath hitched, her voice trembling. "Benedict said the prayer sees all," she whispered, her eyes avoiding Clara's, her guilt raw. Clara's anger flared, but pity tempered it. Isolde was a victim, her jealousy manipulated by Benedict's lies. Before she could speak, a low groan echoed, and the passage trembled, the eyes glow flaring, blinding them. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding from the wall, its skeletal hand reaching for Isolde, drawn to her despair. Clara screamed, raising the relic, its glow flaring, and the Wraith recoiled, but the eyes opened, crimson flames erupting from their pupils, forming a barrier that trapped them. Elias slashed at the flames, his knife useless, and pulled Clara and Isolde back, his arm around them, a shield against the fire. Clara pressed the relic against the inscription, her hand burning, and the flames parted, revealing a spiral stair descending deeper. The Wraith's laughter echoed, its eyes burning through the wall, and Isolde sobbed, her strength crumbling. Clara gripped her hand, her voice firm. "We fight together," she said, but the whisper chanted, "The eye sees your heart." They descended, the stair spiraling into darkness, the relic a beacon, but Clara knew the Wraith's gaze was not just on her soul, but on her love, a fire that could save or destroy them all. The spiral stair led to a cavernous shrine, its walls a mosaic of blackened bones and serpent crosses, its air thick with the scent of sulfur and sorrow. Clara, Elias, and Isolde emerged, the relic in Clara's hand a burning star, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the Wraith's heart. The shrine center held a massive crucible, its surface etched with eyes and flames, filled with a crimson liquid that bubbled like blood, its glow casting grotesque shadows across the bone-laden walls. Clara's heart pounded, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, converging in this place, a sanctuary where the nun's prayer fed on despair. Her habit was scorched, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that the Wraith craved. Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face set with defiance, his soldier's strength a shield for them all. Isolde clung to the stair's edge, her bandaged arm bleeding, her guilt a weight that drew the Wraith's gaze, her betrayal a wound that bled anew. The crucible's glow flared, revealing a figure, Father Benedict, his silver hair matted with blood, his crucifix shattered, his blue eyes burning with madness. He'd escaped the altar's collapse, his fanaticism unbroken, his voice a chant, "The flame is eternal." Clara's stomach churned, his role clear. He was the Wraith's priest, offering souls to bind its power. "You've lost," Elias growled, stepping forward, his knife flashing, but Benedict laughed, his hands tracing the crucible symbols, the crimson liquid surging, its bubbles forming faces, Margaret, Ruth, Thomas, their eyes pleading. Clara gasped, the vision of her betrothed's death vivid, the whisper roaring, "Offer your heart." The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the crucible, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes locked on Clara, drawn to her love, her despair. Isolde screamed, collapsing, her despair a beacon, and Clara lunged, shielding her, the relic flaring. "Leave her," she cried, but Benedict's chant intensified, and the crucible's liquid spilled, forming a ring of fire that trapped them. Elias slashed at the flames, his knife useless, and grabbed Clara's hand, his touch a vow that steadied her. "We break it," he said, his voice fierce, and Clara nodded, her fear tempered by his strength. She pressed the relic against the crucible, its glow blinding, and the liquid recoiled, the Wraith's laughter a scream. Benedict lunged, his hands clawing at Clara, but Elias tackled him, their struggle a blur in the crimson light. The crucible trembled, a crack splitting its surface, and the Wraith surged, its eyes on Clara, the whisper chanting, "Burn for me." Clara clutched Elias's hand, her love a fire that defied the Wraith, and pushed the relic deeper, the crack widening, the flames dying. Benedict screamed, pinned beneath Elias, and Isolde crawled to Clara, her voice broken. "Forgive me," she whispered, but the Wraith's eyes burned, and Clara knew the shrine demanded more than forgiveness, it demanded a heart, and hers was the prize. The shrine of despair beneath St. Agnes Convent was a cavern of blackened bones and crimson light, its crucible a throbbing wound that bled the Wraith's hunger. Clara Voss stood before the cracked obsidian vessel, the burned bone relic in her hand, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing brand that bound her to the nun's prayer. The crimson liquid within the crucible bubbled, its faces, Margaret, Ruth, Thomas, dissolving into a mirror of her own guilt, her green eyes reflecting the fire that craved her heart. Detective Elias Kane pinned Father Benedict to the ground, his knife at the priest's throat, his rugged face fierce with rage, though his eyes flickered with fear for Clara's safety. Sister Isolde knelt nearby, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features etched with despair, her whispered apology a fragile thread in the tapestry of betrayal. The Wraith's veiled form lingered, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces, its laughter merging with the whisper, "Offer your heart." Clara's heart pounded, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, converging in this shrine, a prophecy of her sacrifice. Her love for Elias, exposed by her burned journal, was the Wraith's true fuel, a fire that could save or doom them. She pressed the relic deeper into the crucible's crack, her hand blistering, and the liquid surged, spilling over the edge, its heatless flames forming a cage around her. Elias shouted, struggling with Benedict, who laughed maniacally, his silver hair matted with blood, his shattered crucifix glinting. "The flame is eternal!" Benedict cried, his voice a chant that fed the Wraith. Isolde sobbed, her guilt drawing the spirit closer, its hand reaching for her, but Clara's voice cut through, sharp and defiant. "Take me instead," she cried, her resolve a blade against her fear. The Wraith turned, its eyes locking on Clara, and the crucible's flames flared, blinding. Elias broke free, tackling the spirit, his knife slashing through smoke, but it surged toward Clara, its skeletal hand grazing her chest, burning through her habit. She screamed, the relic falling, its glow fading, and the crucible trembled, a deafening groan echoing as the crack widened. Isolde lunged, grabbing the relic, her hands burning, and thrust it back into Clara's grasp, her voice broken. "You're not alone," she whispered, a moment of redemption that shattered her despair. The Wraith recoiled, its laughter a hiss, and the flames died, the crucible splitting in two, its liquid pooling like blood on the bone-strewn floor. Elias pulled Clara into his arms, his breath ragged, a forbidden embrace that steadied her heart. Benedict scrambled free, his eyes wild, and fled into a shadowed passage, his chant fading. The Wraith vanished, its whisper a warning, the heart still burns. Clara clutched the relic, its heat a promise of pain, and glanced at Isolde, their bond fragile but renewed. Elias's hand lingered on hers, a silent vow, and they turned to the passage Benedict had fled through, its air colder, heavier, a path to the Wraith's true heart. Clara knew the crucible's curse was not broken, but her love, her fire, could yet defy it, if she could face the darkness within. The passage beyond the shrine was a tunnel of frozen stone, its walls etched with serpentine veins that pulsed with a faint crimson glow, as if the catacombs breathed with the Wraith's malice. Clara, Elias, and Isolde moved cautiously, the relic in Clara's hand a searing star, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, the key to the ritual that bound the Wraith. Her habit was scorched, her dark hair loose, her green eyes fierce but haunted by the crucible's curse and Benedict's escape. Elias led, his knife drawn, his rugged face set with resolve, though the loss of his lantern forced them to rely on the wall's eerie light. Isolde followed, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features softened by a tentative redemption, her act of saving Clara a fragile bridge over her betrayal. The whisper was a chorus, insidious, "Speak your sin." Clara's heart raced, the crucible's faces, Thomas's pleading eyes, her own reflection, merging with her guilt over summoning the Wraith. Her love for Elias, a fire that burned brighter with each touch, was the spirit's true target, a heart it sought to claim. The passage sloped downward, its air growing colder, the whispers multiplying, forming voices, Margaret's, Ruth's, Thomas's, accusing her, "Why did you pray?" She clutched the relic, its heat blistering, and a vision flickered, her London room, the forbidden book, her desperate prayer for salvation. She stumbled, her breath hitching, and Elias caught her arm, his touch a forbidden anchor. "You're stronger than it," he said, his voice low, his eyes fierce with faith in her. Clara nodded, her vows fraying, but the whispers laughed, and the wall's veins pulsed, revealing a new inscription, Vox Ignis, voice of fire. Elias traced the words, his fingers dusted with ash. "It's speaking through them," he muttered, his soldier's instincts sensing a trap. Isolde's voice trembled, her eyes avoiding Clara's. "Benedict said the prayer hears all," she whispered, her guilt raw. Clara's pity deepened, Isolde was a victim, her despair weaponized by Benedict's lies. Before she could speak, a low moan echoed, and the passage trembled, the whispers surging, forming a chant, "Confess." The Wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding from the wall, its skeletal hand reaching for Isolde, drawn to her sorrow. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and the spirit recoiled, but the voices intensified, a cacophony that clawed at her mind. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and pulled Clara and Isolde forward, his armor shield against the darkness. The passage opened into a narrow ledge overlooking a chasm, its depths glowing with crimson light, the whispers rising like a storm. Clara's relic pulsed, its heat guiding her to a stone tablet embedded in the wall, its surface etched with the serpent cross and the words Vox Cor, voice of the heart. The Wraith's laughter echoed, its eyes burning through the chasm, and Isolde sobbed, her strength crumbling. Clara gripped her hand, her voice firm. "We face it together," she said, but the whisper chanted, "The voice is yours." Clara knew the Wraith's voices were her own sins, her love a fire that could burn them all, but she would wield it as a weapon, not a curse. The ledge overlooking the chasm was a precarious altar, its crimson glow a mirror to the Wraith's hunger. Clara, Elias, and Isolde stood before the stone tablet, the relic in Clara's hand a burning star, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the ritual that pulsed below. The chasm's depths bubbled with a crimson sea, its surface rippling with faces, Margaret, Ruth, Thomas, Clara herself, their eyes pleading, their mouths chanting the whisper, "Burn your heart." Clara's habit was scorched, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that the Wraith craved, a heart it sought to claim. Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face set with defiance, his soldier's strength a shield for them all. Isolde clung to the ledge, her bandaged arm bleeding, her redemption fragile, her betrayal a wound that drew the Wraith's gaze. The tablet's inscription, Vox Cor, glowed, its serpent cross pulsing like a heartbeat, a voice that spoke through the chasm's faces. Clara's heart pounded, the whispers, Vox Ignis, Vox Cor, converging in this place, a heart where the nun's prayer fed on her despair. She pressed the relic against the tablet, its glow flaring, and the chasm's sea surged, its faces screaming, their voices forming a single word: confess. A vision gripped her, her London room, the forbidden book, her prayer, Thomas's burning hands, his body in the Thames. She gasped, tears streaming, and Elias's hand covered hers, his voice fierce. "You're not its prisoner," he said, his eyes burning with faith in her, a love that defied the Wraith's claim. Father Benedict emerged from the shadows, his silver hair matted, his blue eyes mad, his shattered crucifix replaced by a new one, etched with eyes and flames. "The heart is hers," he chanted, his voice a storm, his hands raised to the chasm. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the sea, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes locked on Clara. Isolde screamed, her despair beacon, and Clara lunged, shielding her, the relic flaring. "Take me," she cried, her voice breaking, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's. Benedict's chant intensified, and the sea surged, a wave of crimson crashing toward them, its faces clawing at Clara's soul. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled Benedict, their struggle a blow on the ledge. Clara pressed the relic deeper into the tablet, her hand burning, and the sea recoiled, the Wraith's laughter a scream. The tablet cracked, a hidden mechanism grinding, and a stone bridge extended across the chasm, leading to a glowing archway. Isolde crawled to Clara, her voice desperate. "I believe in you," she whispered, a redemption that steadied Clara's heart. Elias pinned Benedict, his knife at his throat, but the Wraith surged, its eyes on Clara, the whisper roaring, "The heart is mine." Clara clutched Elias's hand, her love a defiance, and led them across the bridge, the chasm's sea rising, the Wraith's hunger a fire that would consume them unless she faced its heart. The stone bridge spanning the chasm beneath St. Agnes Convent was a fragile thread over a crimson sea, its bubbling surface a mirror of the Wraith's insatiable hunger. Clara Voss led Detective Elias Kane and Sister Isolde across, the burned bone relic in her hand a searing beacon, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the ritual that pulsed through the catacombs. Her habit was scorched, her dark hair loose, her green eyes fierce but haunted by the chasm's faces, Margaret, Ruth, Thomas, herself, their accusing whispers merging with the chant, "Burn your heart." Elias followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face set with defiance, his soldier's strength a shield for them both, though his eyes betrayed a fear for Clara's fate. Isolde stumbled behind, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features softened by redemption, her act of saving Clara a fragile atonement for her betrayal. Father Benedict lay pinned on the ledge, his mad chant silenced, but his presence lingered, a shadow of the Wraith's will. The whisper roared, a relentless voice, "Step into the flame." The bridge led to a glowing archway, its stone frame carved with serpent crosses and eyes that pulsed with crimson light, their pupils shifting as if alive. Above the arch hung a tattered veil, its fabric blackened, swaying as if stirred by an unseen breath. Clara's heart pounded, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor, Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging in this place, a threshold to the Wraith's true heart. Her love for Elias, a fire that burned brighter with each touch, was the spirit's prize, a heart it sought to consume. She clutched the relic, its heat blistering, and a vision flickered, Thomas's burning hands, her desperate prayer, the moment she summoned the Wraith. She gasped, her knees buckling, and Elias caught her, his arm around her, a forbidden anchor that steadied her soul. "You're not alone," he whispered, his voice fierce, his eyes burning with faith in her, a love that defied the curse. Isolde's breath hitched, her voice trembling. "It's here," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the veil, its swaying intensifying, revealing glimpses of a crimson void beyond. Clara nodded, her resolve hardening, her guilt over Thomas a blade she would wield against the Wraith. She raised the relic, its glow flaring, and stepped toward the archway, the veil parting like a curtain to a nightmare. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form filling the void, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara. Isolde screamed, her despair drawing the spirit, and Elias slashed at it, his knife useless, but Clara pressed the relic against the archway's serpent cross, its glow blinding. The veil burned, its ashes scattering, and the void surged, a wave of crimson light pulling them through, the Wraith's laughter a scream. They landed in a vast chamber, its walls a mosaic of burning eyes, its floor a sea of ash, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the center stood a throne of blackened bone, its surface etched with serpent crosses, a figure seated upon it, the Wraith, its veil tattered, its true form a grotesque fusion of nun and demon, its eyes boring into Clara's soul. The whisper chanted, "Offer your heart." Clara's relic pulsed, its heat unbearable, and she glanced at Elias, his hand finding hers, a vow that burned brighter than the Wraith's fire. Isolde stood beside them, her redemption a fragile shield, and Clara knew the archway's veil was not just a gate, but a mirror to her heart, a test she must pass to break the nun's prayer, or be consumed by it. The chamber of the bone throne was a cathedral of despair, its walls a tapestry of burning eyes that pulsed with the Wraith's malice, its ash-strewn floor a graveyard of lost souls. Clara Voss stood before the throne, the burned bone relic in her hand, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the ritual that bound the Wraith. The spirit sat enthroned, its veiled form a grotesque mockery of a nun, its tattered habit revealing glimpses of charred flesh and bone, its eyes like twin furnaces that seared Clara's soul. Her habit was scorched, her dark hair wild, her green eyes fierce with defiance, but haunted by her guilt, Thomas's death, her prayer, her love for Elias, a fire that the Wraith craved. Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face a mask of resolve, his soldier's strength a shield, though his hand trembled as it clasped hers, a forbidden vow that burned brighter than fear. Isolde stood behind, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features etched with awe and terror, her redemption a fragile light in the darkness of her betrayal. The whisper roared, a relentless chorus, "Burn for me." Clara's heart pounded, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging in this throne, a heart where the nun's prayer consumed despair. The Wraith's eyes bore into her, its skeletal hands rising, blood dripping like wax, its voice a guttural chant, "Your heart is mine." Clara's vision flickered, Thomas's burning hands, her London room, the forbidden book, her prayer that birthed this horror. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's grip tightened, his voice fierce. "You're stronger than it," he said, his eyes burning with love, defiance that steadied her soul. Isolde stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We're with you," she whispered, her redemption a spark that warmed Clara's heart, a bond renewed in the face of death. The Wraith rose, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the chamber's light. The ash floor ignited, flames forming a circle around them, their heatless glow a cage. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and stepped toward the throne, the Wraith's laughter a scream that shook the walls. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning through her habit, searing her skin. Clara screamed, but held the relic firm, its glow blinding, and pressed it against the throne's serpent cross, its surface cracking. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde grabbed a charred bone from the floor, thrusting it at the spirit, her despair turning to defiance, a redemption sealed in fire. The throne shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the flames dying, the Wraiths scream a deafening roar. Clara clung to Elias, her hand burning, the relic fused to her palm, its glow fading. Isolde lay beside them, her breath ragged, her redemption complete but her strength spent. The Wraith's form dissolved, its eyes lingering, the whisper a faint echo, the heart endures. The chamber trembled, stones falling, and a hidden passage opened, its air colder, heavier, a path to the Wraith's final lair, or its rebirth. Clara stood, Elias's arm around her, their love a fire that defied the curse. Isolde rose, her eyes meeting Clara's, a bond forged in fire. They turned to the passage, the relic a burning weight, and Clara knew the throne's flame was not extinguished, but her heart, her love, her faith, could yet break the nun's prayer, if she could face the final test. The catacombs beneath St. Agnes Convent were a labyrinth of eternal night, their final passage a frozen vein that pulsed with the Wraith's lingering malice. Clara Voss led Detective Elias Kane and Sister Isolde through the narrow tunnel revealed by the shattered bone throne, the burned bone relic in her hand a searing weight, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a key to the ritual that had consumed her heart. Her habit was tattered, scorched by the Wraith's touch, her dark hair wild, her green eyes blazing with defiance, though haunted by the faces in the chasm's crimson sea, Margaret, Ruth, Thomas, herself. Elias followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face carved with resolve, his soldier's strength a shield for them all, his hand brushing hers in a forbidden vow that burned brighter than fear. Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features softened by redemption, her act of defiance against the Wraith a fragile light in her guilt-ridden soul. The whisper was a faint echo, a chilling promise, the heart endures. The passage sloped downward, its walls slick with moisture, etched with serpent crosses and eyes that glowed faintly, their light dimming as if the catacombs were dying. Clara's heart pounded, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging in her mind, a prophecy of her heart as the Wraith's ultimate prize. Her love for Elias, a fire that had defied the throne's flames, was both her strength and her curse, a heart the Wraith sought to claim. The relic's heat was unbearable, fused to her palm, a brand of her guilt, Thomas's death, her desperate prayer, the nun's prayer that birthed this horror. She glanced at Elias, his presence a lifeline, their oath in the rain a vow she would die to keep. "We're close," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear coiling within her. The passage opened into a vast crypt, its ceiling a dome of jagged stone, its floor a mosaic of blackened bones, its walls lined with niches holding charred relics, rosaries, crucifixes, skulls, each marked with the serpent cross. At the center stood a stone slab, its surface etched with a single eye, its pupil glowing crimson, a final altar to the Wraith's power. Clara's breath caught, the whisper surging, "Face me." The air grew colder, heavier, as if the crypt itself were breathing, and a shadow moved, Father Benedict, his silver hair matted with blood, his blue eyes mad, his new crucifix glowing with eyes and flames. "You cannot break the prayer," he chanted, his voice a storm, his hands raised to the slab. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the eye, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes locked on Clara. Elias lunged, his knife flashing, but the Wraith's laughter shook the crypt, its hand grazing his arm, burning through his coat. Clara screamed, raising the relic, its glow flaring, and the spirit recoiled, but Benedict's chant intensified, the eyes glow surging, a crimson light that blinded them. Isolde grabbed a charred rosary from a niche, thrusting it at the Wraith, her voice defiant. "Leave her," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned through her despair. The crypt trembled, bones rattling, and Clara pressed the relic against the slab's eye, her hand burning, the whisper roaring, "The heart is mine." The slab cracked, a hidden mechanism grinding, and a spiral stair descended deeper, its air a void of despair. Clara led them down, Elias's hand in hers, Isolde's strength renewed, but the Wraith's eyes burned behind them, a promise of a final reckoning. The spiral stair plunged into the catacomb's deepest core, a frozen abyss where the air was thick with the scent of sulfur and sorrow. Clara Voss descended, the relic in her hand a burning star, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her habit was a ruin, her dark hair a wild crown, her green eyes fierce but haunted by her guilt, Thomas's death, her prayer, her love for Elias, a fire that the Wraith craved. Elias followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face a mask of resolve, his arm scorched by the Wraith's touch, yet his hand clasped hers, a forbidden vow that defied the darkness. Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features etched with a newfound strength, her redemption a light that burned through her betrayal. The whisper was a voice, clear and accusing, "Confess your heart." The stair ended in a circular chamber, its walls a tapestry of blackened stone, etched with serpent crosses and eyes that pulsed with crimson light, their pupils weeping blood. At the center stood a pedestal, its surface carved with a single heart, its edges glowing, a final shrine to the Wraith's hunger. Clara's heart raced, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging here, a heart where her love was both weapon and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, fused to her palm, and a vision gripped her, her London room, the forbidden book, her prayer, Thomas's burning hands, his voice, "Why did you pray?" She gasped, tears streaming, and Elias's hand tightened, his voice fierce. "You're not its prisoner," he said, his eyes burning with love, a fire that warmed her soul. Father Benedict emerged from the shadows, his silver hair a halo of madness, his crucifix glowing, his blue eyes fixed on the pedestal. "The heart is hers," he chanted, his voice a storm, his hands tracing the heart's edges, the crimson light surging. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the pedestal, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes locked on Clara, drawn to her love, her despair. Isolde screamed, her rosary flaring, and thrust it at the spirit, her voice defiant. "You won't take her," she cried, her redemption a shield. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "I summoned you," she confessed, her words a blade against her guilt. "I prayed for salvation, and you came. But I won't let you have him." The Wraith's laughter shook the chamber, its hand lunging, burning through her habit, searing her chest. Clara screamed, but held the relic firm, pressing it against the pedestal's heart, its glow blinding. The crimson light flared, the walls weeping blood, and Benedict's chant faltered, his eyes wide with fear. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled Benedict, their struggle a blur in the crimson glow. Isolde grabbed Clara's arm, her voice desperate. "You're enough," she whispered, a bond forged in fire. The pedestal cracked, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, but the whisper lingered, the heart endures. Clara clung to Elias, her love a defiance, and knew her confession was not enough. The Wraith demanded her heart, and the final test was yet to come. The circular chamber was a crucible of crimson light, its walls bleeding, its pedestal a shattered heart that pulsed with the Wraith's hunger. Clara Voss stood before the ruins, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's call. Her habit was a tattered shroud, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's flames. Elias pinned Father Benedict to the ground, his knife at the priest's throat, his rugged face fierce with rage, his scorched arm a testament to his defiance. Sister Isolde stood beside Clara, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that burned through her guilt. The Wraith's veiled form lingered, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces, its laughter merging with a whisper, "Burn for me." Clara's heart pounded, her confession, her prayer, Thomas's death, her love for Elias, a blade that had wounded the Wraith, but not destroyed it. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor, Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converged in this shrine, a heart where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision flickered, Thomas's face, her London room, the moment she prayed, the Wraith's birth. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You're not its slave," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that defied the curse. Isolde's hand brushed hers, her voice firm. "We're with you," she said, a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood. The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the chamber's light. The pedestal's ruins ignited, flames forming a cage around Clara, their heatless glow a demand for her heart. She raised the relic, its glow flaring, and stepped into the flames, the Wraith's laughter a scream that shook the walls. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. Clara screamed, but held the relic firm, its glow blinding, and pressed it into the pedestal's heart, its crack widening. Elias broke free, slashing at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Benedict screamed, his crucifix shattering, his madness crumbling, and Isolde thrust her rosary into the flames, her voice defiant, a redemption that burned brighter than despair. The pedestal shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the flames dying, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar. Clara clung to Elias, her hand burning, the relic fused to her flesh, its glow fading. Isolde lay beside them, her breath ragged, her redemption complete. The Wraith's form dissolved, its eyes lingering, the whisper a faint echo, the heart endures. The chamber trembled, a hidden door creaking open, its air a void of despair. Clara stood, Elias's arm around her, their love a fire that defied the curse. Isolde rose, her eyes meeting Clara's, a bond unbreakable. They turned to the door, the relic a burning weight, and Clara knew the Wraith's demand was not yet met. Her heart, her love, her faith, would face one final trial in the darkness beyond. The hidden door beyond the shattered pedestal led to a void-like chamber, a heart of darkness beneath St. Agnes Convent where the air was a frozen shroud, heavy with the scent of ash and despair. Clara Voss stepped through, the burned bone relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing beacon that tied her to the nun's prayer's curse. Her tattered habit clung to her scorched skin, her dark hair a wild halo, her green eyes blazing with defiance, though haunted by the Wraith's relentless demand, "Burn for me." Detective Elias Kane followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face carved with resolve, his scorched arm a testament to his unyielding protection, his hand brushing hers in a forbidden vow that burned brighter than the darkness. Sister Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm bleeding, her sharp features etched with a fragile strength, a redemption, a light that flickered against her guilt. The whisper was a chilling voice, clear and seductive: "Embrace the flame." The chamber was vast, its walls a seamless expanse of blackened stone, their surface rippling like liquid, etched with faint serpent crosses that pulsed with a dim crimson glow. No ceiling was visible, only an endless void above, swallowing the light of Clara's relic. At the center stood a circular pit, its edges carved with eyes and hearts, its depths glowing with a crimson fire that pulsed like a heartbeat, a final crucible for the Wraith's hunger. Clara's heart raced. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging here, a void where her love for Elias was both her salvation and her doom. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, Thomas's death, her prayer, the Wraith's birth, and a vision flickered, her London room, the forbidden book, Thomas's burning hands, his accusing eyes. She gasped, her knees buckling, and Elias caught her, his arm a forbidden anchor. "You're stronger than this," he whispered, his voice fierce, his eyes burning with love that defied the curse. Father Benedict emerged from the shadows, his silver hair matted with blood, his new crucifix glowing with eyes and flames, his blue eyes wild with madness. "The void is hers," he chanted, his voice a storm, his hands raised to the pit, the crimson fire surging. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the pit, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara, drawn to her heart. Isolde screamed, her rosary flaring, and thrust it at the spirit, her voice defiant. "You won't have her," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned through her despair. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "I made you," she said, her confession a blade. "And I'll end you." The Wraith's laughter shook the chamber, its hand lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. She screamed, but held the relic firm, its glow flaring, and pressed it against the pit's edge, the crimson fire recoiling. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled Benedict, their struggle a blur in the crimson glow. The pit's fire surged, a wave of flames crashing toward Clara, and Isolde grabbed her arm, her voice desperate. "We're enough," she whispered, a bond forged in fire. The chamber trembled, the walls rippling, and the Wraith's eyes burned brighter, the whisper chanting, "The heart is mine." Clara clutched Elias's hand, her love a defiance, and pushed the relic deeper, the pit fire dying, a crack splitting its edge. The Wraith screamed, its form wavering, but Benedict's chant rose, and Clara knew the void's embrace was not yet broken. Her heart, her love, her faith, faced a final trial. The void-like chamber was a crucible of flickering crimson light, its blackened walls rippling like a dark sea, its central pit a throbbing heart that pulsed with the Wraith's hunger. Clara Voss stood at the pit's edge, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's curse. Her tattered habit was a shroud, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's flames. Elias wrestled with Father Benedict, his knife at the priest's throat, his rugged face fierce with rage, his scorched arm bleeding but his resolve unyielding. Sister Isolde stood beside Clara, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that burned through her guilt. The Wraith's veiled form wavered, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces, its laughter merging with the whisper, "Mirror your heart." Clara's heart pounded, her confession, her prayer, Thomas's death, her love for Elias, a blade that had wounded the Wraith, but its demand for her heart endured. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converged in this void, a mirror where her love was both weapon and sacrifice. The relic's heat was a brand, and a vision gripped her. Thomas's face, a London room, the forbidden book, the moment she prayed, the Wraith's birth, Elias's face now, his eyes burning with love. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You're not its prey," he said, his eyes a vow that warned her soul. Isolde's hand brushed hers, her voice firm. "We're with you," she said, a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood. The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the chamber's light. The pit's fire ignited, flames forming a mirror before Clara, its surface reflecting not her face, but Thomas's, then Elias's, then her own, each burning, each bleeding. The whisper chanted, "Choose." Clara's breath hitched, the mirror a trap, her love for Elias, her guilt over Thomas, her faith, all fuel for the Wraith. She raised the relic, its glow flaring, and stepped into the flames, the mirror's surface rippling, the Wraith's laughter a scream. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. Clara screamed, but held the relic firm, its glow blinding, and pressed it into the mirror, its surface cracking. Elias broke free, slashing at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Benedict screamed, his crucifix shattering, his madness crumbling, and Isolde thrust her rosary into the flames, her voice defiant, a redemption that burned brighter than despair. The mirror shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the flames dying, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar. Clara clung to Elias, her hand burning, the relic fused to her flesh, its glow fading. Isolde lay beside them, her breath ragged, her redemption complete. The Wraith's form dissolved, its eyes lingering, the whisper a faint echo, the heart endures. The chamber trembled, a hidden alcove creaking open, its air a void of despair. Clara stood, Elias's arm around her, their love a fire that defied the curse, but the Wraith's mirror had shown her truth, her heart was the key, and its final demand was near. The void-like chamber was a frozen hell, its walls still rippling, its pit's flames extinguished, but the Wraith's presence clung like frost. Clara Voss stood before the hidden alcove, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a testament to her trials, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's hunger. Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned through the darkness. Sister Isolde leaned against the wall, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Father Benedict lay crumpled, his madness broken, his shattered crucifix a relic of his failure. The Wraith's veiled form lingered, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces, its laughter merging with the whisper, "Know your heart." Clara's heart pounded, the mirror's truth, Thomas's face, Elias's, her own, merging with her confession, a blade that had wounded the Wraith but not destroyed it. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converged in this alcove, a truth where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision flickered, her London room, the forbidden book, her prayer, Thomas's burning hands, Elias's face now, his love a fire that defied the curse. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You're our light," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that warmed her soul. Isolde's hand brushed hers, her voice firm. "We're enough," she said, "a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood." The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the chamber's light. The alcove glowed, revealing a stone tablet, its surface etched with a serpent cross and a heart, its edges weeping blood, a final truth of the nun's prayer. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and pressed it against the tablet, the blood recoiling, the Wraith's laughter a scream. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. Clara screamed, but held the relic firm, its glow blinding, and the tablet cracked, revealing a scroll, parchment, ancient, its text glowing with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love." Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde grabbed a charred bone from the floor, thrusting it at the spirit, her voice defiant, a redemption that burned brighter than despair. The tablet shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar. Clara clung to Elias, her hand burning, the relic fused to her flesh, its glow fading. Isolde lay beside them, her breath ragged, her redemption complete. The Wraith's form dissolved, its eyes lingering, the whisper a faint echo, the heart endures. The chamber trembled, the walls cracking, and Clara clutched the scroll, its words a hope, a truth, her love, her faith, could unbind the Wraith, but the final trial was near, a test of her heart in the darkness beyond. The void-like chamber beneath St. Agnes Convent was a frozen abyss, its rippling walls cracked, the shattered tablet a silent witness to the Wraith's unyielding hunger. Clara Voss clutched the ancient scroll, its parchment brittle, its glowing text, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love," a fragile hope against the curse that bound her heart. Her tattered habit hung in scorched rags, her dark hair a wild crown, her green eyes fierce with defiance, though haunted by the Wraith's relentless demand, "Know your heart." The relic, fused to her palm, burned with the inscription Sacrificium Ignis, a searing reminder of her guilt, Thomas's death, her forbidden prayer, the Wraith's birth. Detective Elias Kane stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face carved with resolve, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned brighter than the darkness. Sister Isolde leaned against the wall, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Father Benedict lay crumpled, his madness broken, his shattered crucifix a relic of his failure. The whisper was a chilling voice, clear and mocking, "Love is your doom." Clara's heart pounded, the scroll's words a beacon, her love for Elias, a fire that had defied the Wraith's flames, could unbind the curse, but at what cost? The inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converged in her mind, a prophecy of her heart as the Wraith's prize. She unrolled the scroll further, its text revealing a ritual, the heart that binds must burn with love, not despair, to break the flame. A vision flickered, her London room, the forbidden book, her prayer, Thomas's burning hands, Elias's face now, his love a fire that warmed her soul. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "We'll do this together," he said, his eyes burning with faith, a vow that steadied her heart. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the cracked tablet, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara, drawn to her love. Isolde screamed, her rosary flaring, and thrust it at the spirit, her voice defiant. "You won't take her," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned through her despair. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "My love is not yours," she said, her words a blade against the Wraith's claim. The spirit's laughter shook the chamber, its hand lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. She screamed, but held the scroll firm, its glow flaring, and read aloud, her voice rising over the Wraith's hiss, "By love, I unbind thee." Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Benedict stirred, his eyes wild, and lunged, his hands clawing at the scroll, but Isolde tackled him, her strength a redemption sealed in blood. The chamber trembled, the walls cracking further, and the Wraith's eyes burned brighter, the whisper chanting, "The heart is mine." Clara clutched Elias's hand, her love a defiance, and pressed the relic against the tablet's heart, the scroll's words a prayer, not of despair but of love. The tablet shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, but the whisper lingered, "The heart endures." Clara stood, Elias's arm around her, Isolde's strength beside her, and a hidden passage opened, its air a void of despair, a path to the Wraith's final lair. The hidden passage was a corridor of frozen stone, its walls a tapestry of carved hearts, each etched with serpent crosses and weeping blood, their crimson glow pulsing like a dying star. Clara Voss led Elias, Kane and Isolde through, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a shroud, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's hunger. The scroll, clutched in her other hand, glowed with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love," a hope that her heart could break the curse. Elias followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, a forbidden vow that warmed her soul. Isolde trailed, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. The whisper was a relentless voice, clear and seductive, "Offer your love." Clara's heart raced, the scroll's ritual, the heart that binds must burn with love, a beacon, but the cost loomed large. Her guilt, Thomas's death, her prayer, the Wraith's birth, was a chain, but her love for Elias was a blade to cut it. The corridor narrowed, its hearts pulsing faster, their blood dripping, forming a crimson stream that flowed toward a distant glow. A vision flickered, Thomas's face, his burning hands, Elias's now, his eyes burning with love. She gasped, her breath hitching, and Elias's hand tightened, his voice grounding. "You are our strength," he said, his eyes fierce with faith, a love that defied the curse. Isolde's voice trembled, her eyes meeting Clara's. "We're with you," she said, a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form gliding from a heart, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara, drawn to her love. Isolde screamed, her rosary flaring, and thrust it at the spirit, her voice defiant. "You're not her master," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned through her despair. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and read from the scroll, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The Wraith's laughter shook the corridor, its hand lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. She screamed, but held the scroll firm, its glow blinding, and the hearts wept, their blood surging, forming a wave that crashed toward them. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. The corridor trembled, the hearts cracking, and a figure emerged, Mother Agnes, her black habit a shadow, her face a mask of guilt, her eyes wide with fear. "You've gone too far," she cried, her voice breaking, her hands clutching a rosary, scorched like Clara's. Clara's heart sank. Agnes, the keeper of the secret, had followed them, her complicity a final twist. The Wraith's eyes turned to Agnes, its laughter a hiss, and Clara knew the corridor's hearts were not just hers, but all who had prayed the nun's prayer, a truth that demanded a final reckoning. The corridor of hearts was a frozen hell, its carved hearts bleeding, their crimson stream a river that pulsed with the Wraith's hunger. Clara Voss stood before Mother Agnes, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a testament to her trials, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's flames. Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned through the darkness. Sister Isolde leaned against the heart, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes's presence was a shock, her black habit a shadow, her scorched rosary a mirror to Clara's, her guilt a final twist in the Wraith's design. The Wraith's veiled form lingered, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces, its laughter merging with a whisper, "All hearts burn." Clara's heart pounded, the scroll's words, the nun's prayer unbinds with love, a hope, but Agnes's complicity deepened the curse's roots. Her guilt, Thomas's death, her prayer, the Wraith's birth, was a chain, but her love for Elias was a blade. The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes locked on Agnes, drawn to her despair. Agnes screamed, her rosary flaring, and thrust it at the spirit, her voice trembling. "I sealed it," she cried, her confession a blade. "I prayed to save the village, but I fed its souls." Clara's stomach churned. Agnes, the first to summon the Wraith, had bound it with her own despair, a truth that mirrored Clara's. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and read from the scroll, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The Wraith's laughter shook the corridor, its hand lunging, burning Agnes's chest, searing her soul. She screamed, collapsing, but Clara stepped forward, her voice firm. "You're not alone," she said, her love for Elias a fire that burned through her fear. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde grabbed Agnes, pulling her back, her voice defiant. "We end this," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned brighter than despair. The hearts shattered, their blood surging, a wave that crashed toward them, the Wraith's eyes burning brighter, the whisper chanting, "The heart is mine." Clara pressed the relic against the heart, its glow blinding, and the blood recoiled, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar. The corridor trembled, a hidden door creaking open, its air a void of despair. Agnes sobbed, her guilt a weight, and Clara clutched Elias's hand, her love a defiance, the scroll a prayer. The Wraith's form wavered, its eyes lingering, the whisper a faint echo, "The heart endures." Clara led them through, Isolde supporting Agnes, their bond a fire that burned through the darkness, but Clara knew the blood's reckoning was not complete. Her heart, her love, her faith, faced a final trial in the Wraith's lair. The hidden door beyond the corridor of hearts opened into a cavernous chamber, a heart of darkness beneath St. Agnes Convent where the air was thick with the stench of sulfur and blood. Clara Voss led Detective Elias Kane, Sister Isolde, and Mother Agnes through, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing beacon that bound her to the nun's prayer's curse. Her tattered habit was a scorched shroud, her dark hair a wild veil, her green eyes fierce with defiance, though haunted by the Wraith's relentless chant, "All hearts burn." The scroll, clutched in her other hand, glowed with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love," a fragile hope that her love for Elias could break the curse. Elias followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face carved with resolve, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned brighter than fear. Isolde supported Agnes, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes, her black habit a shadow, her scorched rosary a mirror to Clara's, staggered under the weight of her confession. She had summoned the Wraith decades ago, feeding its souls to save the village. The whisper was a relentless voice, clear and accusing, "Echo your sin." The chamber was a dome of blackened stone, its walls carved with countless faces, nuns, villagers, Thomas, each frozen in agony, their eyes glowing crimson, their mouths open in silent screams. The floor was a sea of ash, rippling with each step, and at the center stood a towering pillar, its surface etched with serpent crosses and hearts, its peak crowned with a crimson flame that pulsed like a heartbeat, a final altar to the Wraith's hunger. Clara's heart raced. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging here, a chamber where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision gripped her, her London room, the forbidden book, her prayer, Thomas's burning hands, Agnes's face now, her own despair mirrored in the older nun's eyes. She gasped, her breath hitching, and Elias's hand tightened, his voice grounding. "We end this now," he said, his eyes fierce with love, a vow that steadied her soul. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the pillar's flame, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara, drawn to her heart. Agnes screamed, her rosary flaring, and collapsed, her guilt a beacon to the spirit. Isolde thrust her rosary at the Wraith, her voice defiant. "You're not our master," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned through her despair. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and read from the scroll, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The Wraith's laughter shook the chamber, its hand lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. She screamed, but held the scroll firm, its glow blinding, and the faces on the walls screamed, their crimson eyes flaring, a chorus of despair that echoed her own. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. The pillar's flame surged, a wave of fire crashing toward them, and Isolde pulled Agnes back, her voice desperate. "We're enough," she cried, a bond forged in fire. The chamber trembled, the faces cracking, and Clara pressed the relic against the pillar's heart, the scroll's words a prayer of love, not despair. The flame recoiled, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, but the whisper lingered, the heart endures. A hidden alcove creaked open, its air a void of despair, and Clara led them through, her love for Elias a defiance, but the chamber's echoes were a truth, her heart, Agnes's, all who prayed, were bound to the Wraith, and the final reckoning was near. The alcove led to a smaller chamber, a frozen shrine where the air was thick with the scent of blood and ash, the walls a mosaic of serpent crosses and hearts that wept crimson tears. Clara Voss stood before a low altar, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a scorched testament, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's hunger. The scroll, clutched in her other hand, glowed with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love, a hope that her heart could break the curse." Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, a forbidden vow that warmed her soul. Isolde supported Mother Agnes, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes, her face a mask of despair, clutched her scorched rosary, her confession a weight that bound her to the Wraith's will. The whisper was a relentless voice, clear and demanding, "Sacrifice your heart." The altar was carved from obsidian, its surface etched with a single heart, its edges glowing crimson, a final crucible for the Wraith's hunger. Clara's heart raced, the inscriptions, Ignis Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converging here, a shrine where her love was both weapon and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision gripped her, Thomas's burning hands, her prayer, Agnes's village, the Wraith's birth, Elias's face now, his love a fire that defied the curse. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You're our salvation," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that steadied her heart. Isolde's voice trembled, her eyes meeting Clara's. "We're with you," she said, a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the altar's heart, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara, drawn to her love. Agnes screamed, her rosary flaring, and staggered forward, her voice breaking. "Take me," she cried, her guilt a beacon to the spirit. Clara's heart sank. Agnes, the first to summon the Wraith, sought to end her own curse. The Wraith's laughter shook the chamber, its hand lunging, burning Agnes's chest, searing her soul. She screamed, collapsing, but Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and read from the scroll, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The altar's heart glowed, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, and the chamber trembled, the walls weeping blood. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde pulled Agnes back, her voice defiant. "We fight together," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned brighter than despair. Clara pressed the relic against the altar's heart, the scroll's words a prayer of love, not despair, and the heart cracked, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream echoing. The whisper lingered, the heart endures. Agnes lay still, her breath shallow, her sacrifice a partial unbinding, but Clara knew the Wraith's demand was not met, her heart, her love, faced a final trial in the darkness beyond. The shrine of sacrifice was a frozen hell, its walls bleeding, its obsidian altar cracked, the Wraith's presence a frost that clung to the soul. Clara Voss stood before the altar's ruins, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a scorched testament, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's hunger. The scroll, clutched in her hand, glowed with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love, a hope that her heart could break the curse." Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned through the darkness. Sister Isolde knelt beside Mother Agnes, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes lay still, her breath shallow, her scorched rosary a mirror to Clara's, her sacrifice a partial unbinding of the Wraith's curse. The whisper was a relentless voice, clear and final, Give me your heart." Clara's heart pounded. Agnes's sacrifice, her guilt, her prayer, her attempt to end the curse, a mirror to her own, but the Wraith's demand for her heart endured. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor, Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converged in this shrine, a heart where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision gripped her. Thomas's face, her prayer, Agnes's village, Elias's love now, a fire that defied the curse. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You are our heart," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that warmed her soul. Isolde's voice trembled, her eyes meeting Clara's. "We're enough," she said, a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood. The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the chamber's light. The altar's ruins ignited, flames forming a heart around Clara, their heatless glow a final demand. She raised the relic, its glow flaring, and stepped into the flames, the Wraith's laughter a scream that shook the walls. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. Clara screamed, but held the scroll firm, its glow blinding, and read aloud, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The flames recoiled, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, and the chamber trembled, the walls cracking, a hidden passage opening, its air a void of despair. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde pulled Agnes to her feet, her voice defiant. "We end this," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned brighter than despair. Clara pressed the relic into the altar's heart, the scroll's words a prayer of love, not despair, and the heart shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream echoed. The whisper lingered, the heart endures. Clara clung to Elias, her hand burning, the relic fused to her flesh, its glow fading. Isolde stood beside Agnes, their bond a fire that burned through the darkness, but Clara knew the Wraith's heart was not yet broken, her love, her faith, faced a final trial in the passage beyond, where the nun's prayers' true end awaited. The hidden passage beyond the shrine of sacrifice was a frozen artery, its walls a seamless expanse of blackened stone that pulsed with the Wraith's fading but relentless malice. Clara Voss led Detective Elias Kane, Sister Isolde, and Mother Agnes through. The relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing beacon that bound her to the nun's prayer's curse. Her tattered habit was a scorched shroud, her dark hair a wild veil, her green eyes fierce with defiance, though haunted by the Wraith's final demand, "Give me your heart." The scroll, clutched in her other hand, glowed with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love," a fragile hope that her love for Elias could break the curse. Elias followed, his knife drawn, his rugged face carved with resolve, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned brighter than the darkness. Isolde supported Agnes, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes, her black habit a shadow, her scorched rosary a mirror to Clara's, staggered under the weight of her guilt, her sacrifice weakening the Wraith but not destroying it. The whisper was a faint echo, a chilling promise, the heart endures. The passage opened into a final chamber, a crucible of crimson light where the air was thick with the scent of blood and ash, the walls a mosaic of serpent crosses and hearts that pulsed like dying embers. At the center stood a massive altar, carved from obsidian, its surface etched with a single, glowing heart, its edges weeping blood, a final crucible for the Wraith's hunger. Clara's heart raced. The inscriptions, Ignis cor ardit, oculus ignis, vox cor, converging here, a heart where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, Thomas's death, a prayer, the Wraith's birth, and a vision gripped her, Thomas's burning hands, Agnes's village, Elias's face now, his love a fire that defied the curse. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You're our light," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that steadied her soul. The Wraith appeared, its veiled form rising from the altar's heart, its skeletal hands dripping blood, its eyes like twin furnaces locked on Clara, drawn to her love. Agnes screamed, her rosary flaring, and staggered forward, her voice breaking. "End it, Clara," she cried, her guilt a beacon to the spirit. Isolde thrust her rosary at the Wraith, her voice defiant. "You're not her master," she cried, her redemption a fire that burned through her despair. Clara raised the relic, its glow flaring, and read from the scroll, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The Wraith's laughter shook the chamber, its hand lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. She screamed, but held the scroll firm, its glow blinding, and pressed the relic into the altar's heart, the blood recoiling, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde pulled Agnes back, her voice desperate. "We're enough," she cried, a bond forged in fire. The altar trembled, a crack splitting its heart, and the Wraith's form wavered, its eyes burning brighter, the whisper chanting, "The heart is mine." Clara clutched Elias's hand, her love a defiance, and pushed the relic deeper, the scroll's words a prayer of love, not despair. The altar shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream echoing, but the whisper lingered, "The heart endures." A hidden door creaked open, its air a void of despair, and Clara knew the final crucible was not yet past. Her heart, her love, faced one last trial. The hidden door led to a final crypt, a frozen hell where the air was a suffocating void, the walls a seamless expanse of blackened stone that wept blood like tears. Clara Voss stood before a shattered throne, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a scorched testament, her green eyes fierce but haunted, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's hunger. The scroll, clutched in her hand, glowed with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love," a hope that her heart could break the curse. Elias stood beside her, his knife drawn, his rugged face fierce with defiance, his scorched arm bleeding but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned through the darkness. Sister Isolde stood beside Mother Agnes, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes, her breath shallow, clutched her scorched rosary, her sacrifice a partial unbinding, her guilt a mirror to Clara's. The whisper was a relentless voice, clear and final, "Defy me, and burn." The throne was a ruin of blackened bone, its surface etched with serpent crosses and hearts, its base surrounded by a pool of crimson blood that bubbled like a living thing, a final heart for the Wraith's power. Clara's heart pounded, the inscriptions, Ignis cor ardit, oculus ignis, vox cor, converging here, a crypt where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision gripped her, Thomas's face, Agnes's village, Elias's love now, a fire that defied the curse. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You are our heart," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that warmed her soul. Isolde's voice trembled, her eyes meeting Clara's. "We're enough," she said, "a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood." The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil shredding to reveal a face of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the crypt's light. The blood pool ignited, flames forming a heart around Clara, their heatless glow a final demand. She raised the relic, its glow flaring, and stepped into the flames, the Wraith's laughter a scream that shook the walls. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. Clara screamed, but held the scroll firm, its glow blinding, and read aloud, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The flames recoiled, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, and the crypt trembled, the walls cracking, the blood pool surging, a wave that crashed toward them. Elias slashed at the Wraith, his knife useless, and tackled its form, his body a shield for Clara. Isolde pulled Agnes to her feet, her voice defiant. "We end this," she cried, a redemption a fire that burned brighter than despair. Clara pressed the relic into the throne's heart, the scroll's words a prayer of love, not despair, and the throne shattered, a shockwave throwing them back, the Wraith's scream echoing. The whisper lingered, the heart endures. Clara clung to Elias, her hand burning, the relic fused to her flesh, its glow fading. Isolde stood beside Agnes, their bond a fire that burned through the darkness, but the Wraith's defiance was not broken. Clara's heart, her love, faced a final, ultimate trial. The crypt of the shattered throne was a frozen hell, its walls cracked, its blood pool extinguished, but the Wraith's presence clung like a shadow, its final defiance a frost that gripped the soul. Clara Voss stood before the throne's ruins, the relic fused to her palm, its inscription, Sacrificium Ignis, a searing key to the nun's prayer's heart. Her tattered habit was a scorched testament, her green eyes fierce with defiance, her love for Elias a fire that burned brighter than the Wraith's hunger. The scroll, now ash in her hand, had burned with the words, "The nun's prayer unbinds with love," a truth that her heart had wielded as a blade. Elias stood beside her, his knife blooded, his rugged face fierce with exhaustion, his scorched arm bleeding, but his hand clasped hers, forbidden vow that burned through the darkness. Sister Isolde knelt beside Mother Agnes, her bandaged arm dripping blood, her sharp features etched with strength, her redemption a light that shone through her guilt. Agnes lay still, her breath gone, her scorched rosary a mirror to Clara's, her sacrifice a final unbinding that weakened the Wraith but demanded Clara's heart to finish it. The whisper was a faint echo, a final plea, "Give me your heart." Clara's heart pounded, Agnes's sacrifice, her guilt, her prayer, her death, a mirror to her own, a blade that had wounded the Wraith but not destroyed it. The inscriptions, Ignis Cor, Cor Ardit, Oculus Ignis, Vox Cor, converged in this crypt, a heart where her love was both salvation and sacrifice. The relic's heat was unbearable, a brand of her guilt, and a vision gripped her, Thomas's face, Agnes's village, Elias's love now, a fire that defied the curse. She gasped, tears streaming, but Elias's voice cut through, fierce and grounding. "You are our salvation," he said, his eyes burning with love, a vow that warmed her soul. Isolde's voice trembled, her eyes meeting Clara's. "You're enough," she said, "a bond forged in fire, a redemption sealed in blood." The Wraith surged, its form towering, its veil gone, its face a grotesque fusion of fire and bone, its eyes swallowing the crypt's light. The throne's ruins ignited, flames forming a heart around Clara, their heatless glow a final demand. She raised the relic, its its glow flaring, and stepped into the flames, the Wraith's laughter a scream that shook the walls. "You cannot break me," it hissed, its hands lunging, burning her chest, searing her soul. Clara screamed, but held her ground, her voice rising, "By love, I unbind thee." The flames recoiled, the Wraith's scream a deafening roar, and the crypt trembled, the walls collapsing, the blood pool drying, a final unbinding that tore the Wraith's heart apart. Elias tackled the Wraith, his body a shield for Clara, his love a fire that burned through the darkness. Isolde stood beside him, her rosary flaring, her voice defiant, a redemption that burned brighter than despair. The Wraith's form dissolved, its eyes fading, the whisper silenced, a void where its hunger had been. Clara collapsed, Elias catching her, her hand burning, the relic crumbling to ash, its glow gone. Isolde knelt beside them, her breath ragged, her redemption complete. The crypt stilled, the walls silent, and Clara clung to Elias, her love a fire that had unbound the curse, but at a cost. Her heart, her faith, bound her to Saint Agnes, a guardian against the Wraith's return. They rose, their bond alight in the darkness, and left the crypt, the catacombs collapsing behind them, a tomb for the nun's prayer, but Clara knew her heart would forever burn, a flame of love and sacrifice.